Right, now it's official. So today's meeting is a combination of the 3 different advisory boards that our department, the Grand County Economic Development Department, works with, which is the Economic Development Advisory Board, Economic Diversification Advisory Council, and the Travel Council Advisory Board. And I'm just going to chair the meeting today. We're not going to be doing really any voting on anything. This is much more of this is calling it a joint special workshop. So, there's not going to be any like decisions or quorum is going to be required. It's more getting everybody on the same page of what our department is doing. What does Grand County's kind of strategy for economic development look like in 2022? Kind of a quick brief overview of what happened over the last year, and start talking about what we've got in the pipeline for next year. There is an agenda that we've got going on, but I think there's going to be room for kind of conversation and discussion throughout this, and some kind of identifying some housekeeping issues with these boards. So that's my little welcome. Before we get into introductions and the content, does anybody have any questions about why we're here? I just want to clear that up for everybody. None being heard. Does anybody have any conflicts of interest, disclosures, or ex parte communication that they would like to share? Seeing none, are there any citizens to be heard at this meeting before we get into the substance of the meeting? Seeing none, I think it's time for introductions. This might be a while. I have a kind of a list of attendees we can reference, and we'll go from there. And then if you're not on this list, we'll catch you after. So I invited folks from the Grand County Administration, Chris and Mallory. I know Chris is taking care of his daughter who has COVID, so he might not be here. Mallory, if you want to introduce yourself really quickly, that'd be great. Mallory is multitasking, I know, so maybe she won't hear this. Mallory is the new county administrator. She was promoted to that role, and Chris Baird was promoted into kind of a financial and strategic role. So Mallory is now my direct boss and manages the day-to-day operations of the county. And Chris is kind of more strategic, still the budget officer, still the purchasing agent, but a brief update there. Let's go to the Economic Development Advisory Board. Let's just go down this list. Dave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Gabriel White, Grand County Commissioner. Here's my face. Hi, everyone.
There you go. Hopefully it looks like the owl found you. Okay, Carly, if you're on the call, you want to briefly introduce yourself? Okay, seeing not Carly. Carly is the city manager, acting city manager at Moab City, and is a part of the EDAB board representing the city of Moab. Jasmine, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, I'm Jasmine Duncan. I'm the mayor of Castle Valley.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jasmine. Court, are you here?
I am. I'm just on an exercise bike, so excuse my out of breathness, but yeah. Court Wright, Chamber of Commerce.
And Court, I think you have a career update you might want to share possibly.
Yes. So I moved out of the tourism. I'm going over into tech space, working remotely, staying in town. So anyway, so there may be a little bit of a mix up with the chamber representative, but we're figuring that out right now.
Okay. Awesome. Court was kind of taking over the Chamber of Commerce representation on that board. Lacey's here for the chamber. Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kelly Thornton. I'm with the Workforce Development Division of the Department of Workforce Services. I serve Grand and San Juan.
Awesome. John, I don't think is here. Rob, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Rob Walker. I've been in town a few years. I used to work in investment management in New York City and Boston before kind of retiring early from that world, and involved with a few different nonprofits in town, on the board of the Land Trust, and sort of newly starting Moab Community Childcare.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Sheik is not here. We do have Brad coming in from the virtual space. If you want to say, hey, Brad.
Hi, Brad Bertosh. I'm the former founder and CEO of venturecapital.org and former founder of Mountain West Capital Network, and currently retired, and I'm an angel investor, and soon to be a full-time resident of Moab.
There you have it. Thanks so much, Brad. Okay, moving on to our Economic Diversification Advisory Council. I do have an introduction of all of these boards and what they do in a moment. We have a representative from the Planning and Zoning Department. It has been John in the past. We do have Elisa here online. Elisa, if you want to take okay.
Yeah, I'm here in place of John today. I'm Lisa Martin. I'm the Associate Planner for the Grand County Planning and Zoning Department.
Thanks so much, Elisa. Emily Campbell, do we have an Emily Campbell? I don't see. RSVP, maybe she's coming late. Gabe, again, thanks for being here. I don't think you need to introduce yourself again.
And Emily did let me know that she's just going to be a little late, but she will get here.
Okay, so Emily's on her way. Do we have Leanna here online? I don't see her. Leanna Eschberger is the president and vice president. The person most senior in charge of USU Moab here in town, which is doing a build out that should be opening in a couple months. And then Carly again. Brandon Bartosh, I don't think can make it. Brandon is the plant manager at Intrepid Potash down Potash Road. You might recognize the big evaporating pools from that plant. And then we have Lacey. Do you want to say a little something?
Yeah, Lacey Shumway, the director of the Chamber of Commerce. And I with the Travel Council and the Diversity Board as a citizen.
Awesome. Moving on to the Travel Council Advisory Board. Jenny, our newly elected chair from the slopes of Breckenridge, Colorado. Can you give us a quick introduction?
Hi, yeah, I'm a little bit new to Moab. I've been there since March. I work for Red Tail, and I've been on the Travel Council since August and really excited. And I happen to be on vacation, so sorry.
You're going above and beyond the Call of Duty. Jason Taylor is here. Jason is one of our newest city council people, and stepped down from his chair position, is going to stay a member of the Travel Council Board, so he can kind of take on those new responsibilities and still be involved. If you want to say anything else about yourself, Jason, now's the time.
No, that's good. Just I work for Western River and Moab Venture Center in town in Canada's Jeep.
Thanks so much, Jason. Sharon, it's your time to shine.
Sharon Kinsley, I am with Canyonlands Natural History Association. I manage actually as of this new month, I manage all of the retail stores, but for my travel council purposes that I have in the information center.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. Daniel Loveridge, who's the general manager of the Hoodoo here in town, could not make it. He's one of the newer members of the board. Chanel Maranuzzi, the manager of Homewood Suites, is also on vacation, so is not able to make it. And there's a vacant position. I know, who takes vacation? There's a vacant position on that board that we're looking probably for a restaurateur, as that's one of the groups that we tax and spend money from, but we don't have representation from that group at the moment. Lacey, we already said hello to. Mary McGann is the commissioner who is the liaison for this board. Mary, if you want to say hello. A quick flash of the face.
Hello, and yes, my name's Mary McGann. I'm Grand County Commissioner.
Mary
And a
was. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and a member of the Travel Council.
There you go. Mary has been the chair of the commission for a while now, stepped down. Gabe is now the chair of the commission, and Jacques Hadler is the new vice chair, just for a little update on that. And then lastly, we have from the board representation, we have Kaylin Jones, who's the city council person representative for the travel council board. If you want to say a quick hello.
Hi, everyone. I don't think I need much more introduction than that. Good to be here.
Kaylin is a part of the volunteer winter search and rescue team. I know this because he helped me get out of a sticky situation on Sunday. All is good, but big thank you to the Grand County Search and Rescue, Grand County Sheriff's Office, Classic Air Med, and Grand County EMS. Basically went backcountry skiing, friend broke her ankle. We had to get out of there. It was dark and they kicked butt. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Kaylin. It was an interlocal affair. County Commissioner Evan Clapper was there. City Council person Kaylin Jones was there. So it feels good to be supported by everyone in the community. I'll keep it going. Utah Association of Counties. We got Patrick and Stuart.
Hi there, everyone.
Stuart Clayson.
We'll hear more from them shortly. They'll talk plenty, so we don't need to give them more airtime. Jade, who's here, you want to do a quick introduction?
Jade Powell of the Southeast Utah Association of Local Governments, and we are the economic development district for Southeast Utah. I'm the regional economic development strategist as well as the deputy director.
Awesome. So Jade drove down to Price to see us. He's a fearless man in times of COVID. So we got Megan Brewster also, or Megan Elizabeth Gessel as it shows up there, but.
Hey, yeah, it's Brewster, but Zoom has lots of issues, we all know. So hi, everyone, I'm Megan. It's great to be here. I'm with the Sorensen Impact Center. We're a social impact consultancy affiliated with the University of Utah, working on a lot of the regional economic development work with you all. Excited to be here. And I did want to recognize two of my colleagues that could also join, Chris and Danica, who are here as well. So thanks, August.
Chris and Danica, can you just say a quick something so I can see which face is yours?
Hello, everybody. Excited to be here and get to talk with you more about this opportunity.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having us, everyone.
Sweet. And I think the last one on my list, or I guess we had two more. We've got Max Backlund from the Gardner Institute.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. I'm Max Backlund. I do economic development research at the Gardner Institute.
Awesome. And then I think we also have Ralph Garrison. If you're here, can you say a quick hello? I'm thinking it might be the phone number. Ralph has been in conversation with Jen.
Sound check.
There you are.
Sound check.
We can hear you.
Good day. Thank you. Yeah, good. I needed to be smarter than my phone. Bad way to introduce myself. Ralph Garrison, a Denver-based consultant in advisory services with the objective of assisting tourism-dependent economies in their transition from a legacy way of looking at tourism as it contributes to the economy to a new and different way of looking at what they do and how they do it based on the changing marketplace. The specialty that I am most interested in is at the confluence of visitors, second homeowners, local residents, and the like, all working together toward common interests. Where that's easier said than done. My business profile is several dozen resort communities in the Western United States and along the Eastern coastal regions. My hope is to be able to listen and learn from you all, and to the extent that your future plans would benefit from broader context and the advisory services that I offer, I am pleased to be considered, and will answer the call if the bell rings.
Thanks.
Good morning.
Ralph has been very patiently and kind with his time as we've been trying to figure out, talking through this economic development master plan and how are we gonna do that, and has been very good to kind of bounce some ideas off of, and may or may not end up being a part of the execution of that or the development of that. That's kind of all up in the air, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I wanted to make sure that Ralph was here and kind of observe and listen, be a fly on the wall. Okay. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah.
Yes, my staff. I guess I'll go really quick. I'm August Granith. I'm the director of the Economic Development Department in Grand County as of September of 2021. I'm fairly new and have been kind of just absorbing in the last 4 months. And I think kind of this starting in January is the first time I'm really getting my head wrapped around everything we got going on, and gonna start implementing some programs and projects and do some strategic development going on and make something happen that's good, hopefully, and that people like. Ben, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Alter. I am the Economic Development Specialist here in Grand County. I've been with the county since April of 2021, and in this role since about a month ago. I'm very, very excited to be working on these issues. And in case anything gets confusing, I am Ben. Well, I know it says August right there. Maybe next time we'll figure that out. Not a biggie though.
We thought it'd be fun to switch computers. That turned out to be a bad idea. Robert, in the back. I don't know if it'll see you, but it'll identify you.
Yeah, I'm Robert Riberia, and I'm the Assistant Marketing Director for the Moab Travel Council. And I've been with the Travel Council since the last century.
Yeah.
I've been here a long time.
Robert's our veteran member of the department, and helps us understand the longer view of things.
We just got
Say it again? Oh, great. And then our newest addition to the team, Vegan Metzner.
Hello, I'm Vega Metzner. I worked for the city of Moab until about 2 days ago, where I am now a member of the Economic Development Department. I am the film commissioner for the Moab to Monument Valley Film Commission. I was doing that for 5 years for the city, and 2 years, that was full-time, 2 years as an assistant prior. And I stemmed from the film industry for about 25 years before that. So I know the ins and outs of the film industry. I've been on and off in Moab for 30 years, and I'm originally from New York, but I'm here to help the Economic Development Department and through the film process in whatever ways I can. And that's my face. You can see me. I don't even know if it's reading me.
You might have to come up closer if they really want to see you.
But I'm happy to answer any questions related to film and how that works in relation to this county. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah. So there you have it for our staff. Yeah, I'll go to. Oh yeah, okay. We have Melissa online. Did we? Yeah. Yeah, Melissa, if you want to unmute and show your face and say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Melissa Stott. I'm the Assistant Marketing Director for the Economic Development. And next month, I'm going to be 3 years working for the county.
I think that's a good way to kind of capture everything that we do here. Ben is our kind of full-time economic development, business kind of focused person. We've got Melissa and Robert who have the marketing focus, and Biga is now on film. And I kind of touch a little bit of everything from above. So we're gonna basically just be a carbon copy of the state office with tourism, film, and business being the pots that we stick our hands into here and try to do some good with. And then I think we had some other people joining us. Leanna from USU Moab. You want to say something?
Hi, I don't know if you can see me or not. I shared my camera, but I am the Associate Vice President for the Utah State University campus here in Moab. And I'm here to provide any kinds of, especially training support for any new industries, for example, and just sort of be a partner in helping with economic diversification.
Awesome. So that's everybody, I think. Last call if I missed you. Okay. So again, I hope everybody has some patience stored up today. We have a lot of people. We have a lot to go over. My hope is that this meeting won't go too long, but I do have time in this space reserved until 5 o'clock. It will not go over 5 o'clock. I'm hoping it'll take less time than that. But I think in the interest of getting everybody on the same page, doing one of these is worthwhile. So I think we can get going. The plan for today is that we have some kind of regional and outside of Grand County focus that the folks at Utah Association of Counties, Sorensen Impact Center, the Ken Gardner Policy Institute, and Jade are going to touch on, and then we're going to get into kind of the Grand County very specific side of things. So I'll turn it over to Patrick and Stuart if you want to get us started here.
Yeah, thanks for that, August. It looks like if I'm going to share some slides, you'll have to stop sharing the agenda for a moment.
Yeah, I'll make sure that you can.
But just while we're getting kind of up and running, I think as August mentioned, both Stuart and myself at EDAC, as well as our partners at Sorensen Impact and Gardner Policy Institute, and then of course in the room, Jade Powell with the Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments. All of us have collectively been working on a number of projects that we feel has been very kind of regionally impactful. And I think today we wanted to give you kind of a quick synopsis of what those are, and in particular, a couple projects that we think are really meaningful, one being the Opportunity Zone and Recovery Playbook, and the other being this kind of revised prioritized project list, which we'll get into with Jade. But just to help us reference, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was pointing to Ben, sorry.
Perfect. My goal on this as well is not to, I'm trying to make it presentation here, not just that. My goal on this is not to just make it slides that we go through and that you all kind of get bored with, but to hopefully spur conversation in the room. So given that I probably can't see you necessarily, I can see 3 or 4 boxes on my grid here, but if there's others, you can raise your hand virtually, or August, you can feel free to interrupt as we go through it. But I'll go ahead and kick things off, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues at Sorensen, and then have Max from Gardner go, and Stuart and Jade, you guys can kind of come at the end. But one of the things we wanted to start with is we were very fortunate to be grant award winners from the Economic Development Administration at the federal level to create something called Opportunity Zone and Recovery Playbook. And the grant in particular was awarded to Sorensen Impact at the University of Utah. We as partners at the Association of Counties were recognized, and certainly we've been very fortunate to partner with the Gardner Policy Institute from the beginning. But for those of you that don't know, opportunity zones were first enacted in late 2017, early 2018. They're a federal incentive for private capital to invest in designated areas that are either low-income census tracts, rural census tracts. They were designed to be areas of need. And the way that it worked was that the governors of all 50 states at the time had a small window at the beginning of 2018 to select 25% of the low-income census tracts by volume in their state. And Governor Herbert at the time ran a very balanced process and ended up selecting 46, which was our full allotment that we were allowed, that are pretty spread evenly between urban and rural. And as many of you may know, almost all of Grand County is an opportunity zone, very notable exception being most of Main Street and Moab, because as we saw in many of our rural communities, the census tracts that were eligible to be selected were either very, very small because of the population density that may exist around a corridor like Main Street and Moab, or very, very large because the other census tract basically encompassed the entire county. So Grand County was very fortunate to receive one of these. And our work that kind of was enabled, at least in the beginning, by the governor's office here in Utah, really kind of traces its roots back to the founder of the Sorensen Impact Center in Jim Sorensen. And as many of you probably know from the name, Jim is a very prominent businessman and philanthropist here in the state of Utah. He's been very passionate about what he refers to as impact investing, which is using his investments to better local communities, both here in the US and across the world. And he was very passionate about trying to find incentives to help others kind of follow his lead. And opportunity zones were one of the biggest kind of creations at the federal level to try and encourage that type of investing. And really what it does, to not bore you with too many tax details, it creates a really unparalleled tax incentive for high net worth investors to put their money into investment funds that, instead of trying to go find investments in, you know, the high income zip codes of Silicon Valley, they're now scouring the US to look for opportunities in places that are a little bit more off the beaten path. So having one in Grand County is certainly very advantageous. What we found in the beginning, the work that we did, was that there was really two things that were needed. I think we noticed that there was a lot of inbound traffic kind of coming from the community level. There were folks in counties like Grand and in cities like Moab kind of picking the phone up and calling the governor's office and saying, so we got a zone, like, what does that mean? Does the money show up tomorrow? How does this work? And we had investors, because of the prominence of people like Jim Sorensen, calling the governor's office and saying, hey, I just raised a bunch of money that was interested in this tax incentive, and we think Utah's a pretty attractive place. Who's really working to help curate a marketplace? And I think really early on, the governor's office figured out that there needed to be somebody kind of playing a coordination role. And I think we were very fortunate to kind of luck into a partnership where on one hand, the Utah Association of Counties, which we'll tell you a little bit more about as we go, but it's a membership organization of every county in the state, they had very much kind of represented that local buy-in at the county level. And on the flip side, our partners at Sorensen Impact, thanks to the great work that Jim and you know, not the least of which to mention Megan and Chris and Danica and their team have kind of put together, they really were nationwide leaders in the investment side. And so we were very fortunate to kind of pair those two organizations together and bring Gardner along with us to kind of be the quantitative and macroeconomic data specialists to really create a resource kit to come to counties and say, look, this is how we can help you take advantage of this kind of, you know, once in a generation kind of incentive that is really trying to get private investors to come invest in a range of different things, whether it's businesses in the community, whether it's real estate ranging from hotels to housing to commercial space, whether it's kind of bringing them in to, you know, help build affordable housing that might be needed for some of the workforces that are moving and kind of sprouting up all over the state. It was really important to kind of have somebody playing that sort of air traffic controller role, because it's a hugely broad incentive, and it ranges from, I mentioned, private investment funds to banks to family offices to foundations. And it's not exactly the same language across the board. There's no efficient marketplace where you can go on and just throw a project into a machine and it spits out, this is an investor that you need to talk to. So we thought putting the team together was really kind of a crucial step. And all of this had been occurring pre-pandemic, I think, which is a big thing to note, which in the beginning days of when this happened in 2018 and 2019, I think a lot of folks were kind of sitting around the table saying, yeah, this sounds interesting, but I still don't quite know if I'm gonna, you know, take my cap and go invest in places that are not as safe as the Wasatch Front or some of these bigger economies that are there. In a post-pandemic world, the amount of federal money that has now flown into communities, and I think we'll be talking about that as we get into Jade's presentation and Stuart's, it's really kind of flipped the investment paradigm that exists in the private sector to where things like public-private partnerships, where private investors' money is coming in alongside federal subsidies or federal grants, are becoming increasingly common. And so having tools and having resources available to be able to have those conversations has been one of the critical factors that we as a team have been working on. And I think in the early days, a lot of what you got was Stuart and me and the team at Sorensen hopping in a vehicle and driving to the county and spending the day saying, you know, hey, what are the projects you're working on? And I think some of you may have participated in the investor summit that we hosted at the Hoodoo with Jim Sorensen, who actually very graciously flew down some investors from Salt Lake City to Moab for the day. And then Mayor Niehaus, you know, put together in conjunction with our partners at the county, a great half-day pitch day where people came in and pitched various hotel projects or business projects and really tried to network with the investor community. The unfortunate bad luck of that event is we did it in January 2020. So we created a lot of good momentum that very promptly hit pause for a long kind of entry to COVID that we all found ourselves in. But I think those were the examples of what we were really seeing a lot of positive momentum come from. And as a result, you know, oh, go ahead. Is there a question? Or just a background sound? I'll take the silence as a background sound because I'm teeing up the mic to hand off to our friends at Sorensen. But what we found really was that, you know, it's all well and great to have a team coming to your community to try and help you with these projects and saying, hey, let's take as many meetings as we can. Let's try and get involved. We have a Rolodex of investors. If you have a project in a place like Grand County, let us help you raise capital for it. But at the end of the day, it wasn't really efficient. It wasn't scalable. It didn't allow us to go to the other 16 counties in the state that also have an opportunity zone that are having these types of conversations. And it was then that the federal level of the Economic Development Administration really recognized the good work and the need that we were seeing in Utah to put some capital behind creating what we call the Rural Opportunity Zone Playbook. And I'll let our friends at Sorensen tell you a little bit more about that. But the high level kind of backstory is that it really tries to replicate a lot of the best practices and learnings that we have from really, you know, going on 3 years of being in the communities. And I think we'll hit on a lot more what those details really look at, but it's trying to kind of institutionalize and operationalize a lot of those best practices so that, you know, not only opportunity zone investing, I know we keep using that term, but really any type of project that you have that needs private capital, we're hoping that this playbook really is creating a roadmap for how communities can access that, how we can participate in new conversations as this landscape continues to change. And as we move into a hopefully, I'll knock on wood, a post-pandemic world, we really position counties in the state of Utah to be able to take advantage of it to the fullest extent. So, you know, Chris, I believe you'll be kind of presenting most of this from the playbook. I'm not sure if Megan wants to say a few words before we jump in, but by all means, I'll hand the mic over to you. And since I'm screen sharing, I'm happy to drive the slides. So you can just let me know when you want to advance to the next one.
Thank you. Megan, did you want to say anything before, or should we just get started?
I guess the only thing I would say is like Patrick mentioned, one of the things we've learned in this process too is that given that there's over 8,000 zones across the US, what we're seeing for communities that have been successful is really having a level of preparedness and kind of a differentiated brand to then attract that capital. And so the way this playbook is structured is really laying out a process for that, and it's resources about how to help you all do that. So we're excited to talk with you, and I'll turn it over to Chris. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Sweet. Okay, so the playbook was published in 2021 in Sorensen and Utah Association of Governments, EDA, and the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity helped create that. So we'll send these slides out after, and you're welcome to download it. It's also on the Sorensen website. And you know, we'll make sure to send those links out so everyone can take a look at the playbook. Next slide. So there's a 6-step process. Plan for impact. That's really, you know, trying to see what you want to accomplish. You know, are you trying to get affordable housing? You're trying to get new retail spaces, new hotels put in place? You know, like what are you really trying to drive for that community value? Building your team is really about, you know, setting yourself up for success with the best partners possible. You know, that could be partnering with, you know, USU, you know, with that new campus, you know, being opened in Moab. You know, it could be opening with Snow College, you know, being able to train workers for a new manufacturing facility that's coming in. Partner with nonprofits, you know, any organization who really wants to like be involved. It's really important to get those sort of community level businesses involved on your team. Laying the foundation is really about understanding who and, you know, what they're going to invest in. There are different types of investors. There's not like a cookie cutter, you know, version. Each one is very different, looking for different types of returns. You know, some could be very just philanthropic, you know, like, you know, more donations. Some are more community driven, and some are looking for long-term investments. Some are looking somewhere kind of in between all of those things. Using your toolbox, that's really just making sure that you're using every source of funding and availability of resource to you. You know, state, local, federal, they all have incentives, especially for rural regions. And, you know, with new legislation coming out, you know, all the time, you know, those pocketbooks are going up. So making sure that we know what those resources are so that we can apply and get those funding sources that you guys need. Framing your project is really just making sure, you know, we're driving home the message of what we're trying to do, and, you know, where this project is going to go. You know, what will it lead to? Where will it be in 5, 10, 15, you know, 30 years? And how are we going to make sure that that affordable housing leads to, you know, more manufacturing, you know, more opportunities for retail, you know, or transportation, you know, whatever that may be. And 6 is making sure that you're on that same sort of level with your investors, and making sure that your visibility on the project and your goal align with each other, you know, throughout the entire time of the project. Next slide, Patrick, please. So the strategies really coincide with the previous slide, but it's more a more in-depth version on a few of them. So the quarterback of association, that's really trying to work with one solid organization. So like Association of Governments is a great example of, you know, who can lead out these sorts of initiatives, you know, a place for citizens to engage, a place for your investors to go back, be like, hey, you know, what's going on with this project? How can we get more information? Places for community organizations to be more involved and get information on how to be involved. Recruiting local leaders, you know, you really want that, especially with rural local areas, you know, everyone really trusts each other and you have to help each other. And, you know, in such a small area, you know, you really have to be excited about the future of these projects because they're going to affect you whether you want to or not. So making sure you choose the right project and get the right people involved and, you know, in revitalizing that community is really, really important. Creating that cohesive brand is, you know, what is the message, you know, what is the narrative, how are we going to execute this and be prepared for, you know, down the line, what we're trying to accomplish. And understanding investors, you know, there's, like I said, there's not a cookie cutter version of each investor. Some people really want to put in retail spaces. Some people really want hotels. Some people want, you know, none of that. So it really just depends on how you want to structure your community and what you're going for. And that goes into that next one is being able to be adaptable and having a list of opportunities and projects that you want. So, you know, one investor may really want to put in that hotel, whereas you in the community really want, you know, more retail, more restaurant space, you know, that's, you know, a difference. And you're going to look for a different kind of investor and be involved in different ways. And I think, you know, it's really just important to make sure that, you know, we're giving as many possible projects as we kind of can. Next slide, please, Patrick.
And just quickly, Chris, I'll before I jump to the next slide, I mean, just as a quick example, you know, one of the things that I think we've seen is we kind of present these as the finishing act is, you know, just to give kind of a tangible example. In Box Elder County, we were engaged very early on by a project that was, it was actually a retired airline pilot who lived in the community and he was looking to rehab an old building on their main street called the Union Block Building. And he had kind of engaged in conversations with the economic development kind of leaders in that community. And I think they sort of had run into a brick wall where it was, you know, hey, we know you're in the zone. We want to use the capital. We're not quite sure how to kind of bridge this gap. And I think walking through these kind of steps of going through, you know, first, are there investors at the local level? How do we create in a kind of cohesive communication strategy so that this doesn't become a fragmented conversation, which is, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had an investment to go into an old historic building to turn it into commercial on the bottom floor and housing on the top? It was, well, hey, what does that look like? If we actually go after it, what are the steps that we need to do? And so our team was engaged very early on in the process, and it actually turned into a very successful investment. It was about a $3 million opportunity zone investment where outside capital came in and helped fund the transformation of this building. And it was done in a way that was both responsible to preserve the history of the building, but also kind of modern in the sense that it was attracting a lot of their young workforce population who was interested in potentially living there. And I think it was a good early example that also got on the radar of the White House at the time. So the White House had an office of opportunity zones in the previous administration, and they actually flew out Scott Turner, who directed that office, to see the project and do a little press conference. And so I just wanted to give that anecdote as we're kind of running through the strategies and running through the best practices. Those are the types of examples where I think we're pulling from. It's you know, if you see this and you're thinking, how does this matter to me in Grand County? You know, it doesn't have to be an old historic building. It could be a hotel development. It could be an operating business trying to raise startup capital. It can be kind of any of these things. But I think that's what we're really hoping this toolbook kind of provides a resource to. So I'll jump to the next slide and turn it back to you, Chris.
Thank you. That was great. You know, it gives a little bit more concrete evidence in what we're trying to accomplish over the whole thing. So this is really just a summarization of kind of the playbook. You know, the playbook is a resource. The playbook has, you know, templates for emails. It has networks. It has case studies. It has tools. You know, it is everything that you kind of need to get started and to really flourish and accomplish, you know, in these opportunity zones and really any sort of like any investment. You know, it's just a, you know, it's a guide on how to get you there. So that's actually all the slides that I had, and I'll happily turn it over to Max to finish out his piece in this.
Perfect. And Max, just quickly before you go, and I'll hopefully tee you up as well. We have this picture in here, not to run through, you know, I'm sure folks like Brad are like flash forwarding to their 30-year career in investing and saying, this looks familiar to me. But for others wondering why we have all these complicated words on there, I think what's interesting is that, in our first conversations with county economic development folks, there were a lot of people who were just kind of like, I don't even know what a capital stack is. Like, how do I even engage in a conversation with an investor? And so that's part of the goal of having some of these things in here, is to sort of provide that investment one-on-one language, so that whether it's in an opportunity zone or not, I think as this new paradigm comes of public-private partnerships, these are the types of resources that we feel kind of folks on the ground need to be really familiar with. And I think the second piece of that, Max, to kind of tee you up, is we really wanted to know, well, on the flip side, like, what are counties prioritizing, and what are the areas that you're seeing kind of across the state that matter for economic recovery, and kind of how they factor into the playbook. And so we're very fortunate to have the folks at the Gardner Policy Institute. I know many of you have probably worked with them before, but having their expertise along with Sorensen has really been kind of critical to the project. So Max, if you want to jump in and tell them a little bit more about that research, I think they'll find it pretty uniquely fascinating as well.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks, Megan and Chris. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is Max. I do economic development research for the Gardner Institute at the University of Utah. And economic development in the state is really in an interesting position since the start of the pandemic. So before the pandemic started, most of the economic development projects coming through the state pipeline were heavily office oriented. So they were information technology or financial services or something along those lines. And since the pandemic, that has really flipped. And so now there's a lot of manufacturing projects in the pipeline, a lot of distribution projects. And this is all a result of efforts to reshore those manufacturing operations and kind of shorten supply chains and get distribution lines in a better shape. So it's really been interesting to me as we've talked with these counties across the state about different impact priorities and what they're looking for from their economic development effort, and how that's been influenced by the changes since the pandemic, and looking forward into the future, how those plans are taking shape. So we did a survey, a broad survey of all the rural counties in the state, and asked about impact priorities. We asked about strategies, and these are some of the results that we've seen. So number one, infrastructure investment, not a huge surprise. There's a lot of federal funding for that at the moment. So that could be infrastructure in terms of broadband, so trying to bring greater broadband access. That could be infrastructure in terms of physical infrastructure like highways and things like that. We're also seeing a lot of infrastructure in local airports and some of the site development that happens around those airports. So there's quite a bit of interest in that at the moment, and trying to organize that and get everything moving forward there. Workforce development is another big issue. So we see a lot of that. Educational attainment is a traditional marker of prosperity. And so we're seeing a lot of communities invest in that as well. We're seeing a lot of that in the area currently, as we're seeing a decline in mining jobs and in utilities jobs. We're starting to see a lot of retraining of people in neighboring counties to take other types of jobs. So workforce development is not really a surprising number two either. Economic diversity is, of course, an effort across the state. That's one of the foundational pillars of economic development. So Utah has one of the most diverse economies in the nation, and that's traditionally in the urban sectors. We're a very urbanized economy. So trying to spread some of that economic diversity across the state is a big area of focus for everyone right now. Number four, affordable housing. So this is one that we're seeing across the state. So everything is really tight right now, and trying to get builders to come out and take advantage of some of those opportunities has been difficult. And then number five, higher wages. Again, a foundational pillar of economic development, but something that we're trying to see specifically in the area, as well as we try and create more diversity and bring in other jobs that'll be high wage paying jobs. Sorry, that was hard to say. That's a big area of focus as well. Can I get the next slide there, Patrick? So these are some of the strategies that have been ranked by people across the state. So increasing economic diversity is, of course, number one. That's something that we do in economic development. Number two, local business expansion and retention. That's a big rural strategy. So try and support local entrepreneurs and create jobs and investment that way. So that fits right in line with the playbook as well. Infrastructure investment, as I've mentioned, is a big one. Support for entrepreneurism. Attracting new employers, it falls a little bit lower on the list, just because that's traditionally been more difficult, especially in Utah. And then targeted industry development is falling lower, and increasing tourism, again, is falling lower due to some of the difficulties there. And then there's not a lot of interest in recruiting remote workers. So that's been an initiative at the state for a few years now. The pandemic has kind of accelerated opportunities there. It has not really gained traction in rural communities. for a couple of different reasons. One, it's kind of hard to figure out the best way to do that. And two, it's kind of difficult to understand all the economic impacts and benefits of that. So that's why it's probably ranked number 8 on this list. So sorry, you can actually go that. Thanks, Patrick. So I don't want to overwhelm anyone with a table. I mean, economists love tables like this. So this is actually one of my favorite slides, but I understand if other people don't feel that way. But what we're looking at here is a breakdown of the southeastern AOG. So these are the 4 counties in there. And you can kind of see based on where the jobs are located, where the job centers are. So Carbon and Grand, traditional job centers for the area. Emory and San Juan, sometimes commuting, sometimes our own economy. We actually split these 2 into functional economies. So we count Carbon and Emory as one functional economy at the Institute, and then San Juan and Grand as their own separate economy. Different types of jobs there. You can see different wages there. So those really high paying jobs in Carbon and Emory County are tied to the utilities sectors and the natural resources sector. You can see a lot of tourism, some manufacturing tied to Grand and San Juan. So interesting setup here. You can see that combined, these 4 counties represent about 1% of the Utah economy. So in terms of employment, our employment in Utah is heavily urbanized, about 66%. That's 2 out of every 3 jobs is located in either Salt Lake or Utah County. Our long-term projections show that that's likely to continue, if not more so. So some of the things that are interesting that are happening at the state level that way, Salt Lake is going to actually add, Salt Lake County will actually add more jobs than it will residents over the next 40 years. So we're starting to see that employment really concentrate in those urban areas, and it'll start to spread that population growth out. So more rural counties are seeing a lot of population growth, but not necessarily employment growth. Actually, can you switch to the next slide? This will actually support me, Patrick, in what I'm trying to say. So we're seeing a lot of that population growth. That has to do with these last 2. So these are trends that we're seeing in our long-term projections. That increasing out migration of young adult populations is directly tied to the employment growth in these urban areas. That net in-migration of retirement age populations is happening as we start to see some of these traditional retirement areas become overcrowded. So if you look at the massive growth that's happened in Washington County with St. George, it's starting to push some of those retirement age populations away from those crowded urban centers and growth centers, and it's pushing them into more rural communities. So our median age in these long-term projections is actually spiking in a lot of these rural areas. So you're seeing high population growth without the accompanying employment growth to go with it. So we expect a lot of retirement age migration over the next 40 years. And that has to do with some of the things that are happening in the industry world. So if you look at letter B there, peaking projected employment in 2040 for a lot of these rural communities, that has to do with the industries that are happening here. So manufacturing, for example, about 90% of our projected growth over the next 40 years in manufacturing will happen by the year 2040. So what that means for rural communities is there's a 20-year window to try and increase that economic diversity. And it's really important to try and do that as quickly as possible to take as much advantage of that window as you can. So by 2040, we're looking at a lot of that employment growth having occurred already in those different industries. If you look at the urban centers, it's a lot more professional services. It's a lot more of scientific services, technical services, financial services. So a lot of those more office-oriented jobs over the next 40 years will grow significantly, and they're going to focus primarily in the urban areas. The goods-producing industries are heavily concentrated in northern Utah. So you see a lot of those things with box elder, cash. Those are big, heavy industrial manufacturing projects that are locating up there. So now is really the time to kind of prioritize economic diversity and try and address some of those things and create some advantages that will shift that growth more towards the south, more towards the southeastern counties, and try to understand the different ways that that's going to happen. And then letter A, of course, is the declining employment from natural resources and utilities in this area will be significant. This is something that will affect the entire central rural region of the state, and trying to understand some of the different ways that we can shift growth from these other areas of the state into these central rural areas is going to be an important priority for the state for the future. So there are positives to this. So Grand County will become the largest employment center in the area over the next 40 years. There will be quite a bit of growth that happens here. This is actually one of the places that will stay younger amongst the rural counties. So there is a positive notion that way. and it will continue to draw in a lot of tourism spending and a lot of tourism growth. So there are positives in these long-term projections. I'm personally very excited for this area for the future, and I know that we're going to be doing a lot of work here over the next few years, at least with the research that we've got in the pipeline. So I'm actually coming down on February 7th for the Business Summit. I'll be talking a little bit more about these things if you'd like to come and learn more. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I was still muted. Sorry. I was going to add in, I think that kind of concludes our part of the presentation. I think you hit on the big next step, which is we all anticipate coming down for the Canyonlands Business Summit next month. And we hope we hope to see most of you in person if we can safely, and certainly kind of continue this dialogue and see how we both continue kind of talking about the playbook and investment in Grand County to kind of hit on the trends that Max mentioned. So, you know, I think our project goes much larger than I think just Grand County, but certainly it kind of hits on kind of our role in this community here today. And it really does tee up, I think, the next part of what we want to get into, which is talking about how we leverage some of the regional trends happening with the associations of governments across the state. We're very fortunate, and I mean this sincerely, not just because he's in the room with you, but I do think that Jerry Gamber, who's the director of the Southeast Utah Association of Local Governments, and Jade Powell, who's with you in the room, we're very, very fortunate to have the leadership. They really have turned that AOG into one of the leaders in the state, in my opinion, and I think really have kind of positioned the region to take advantage of a lot of what's coming. So before we kind of turn the time to Jade and Stuart, just to quickly tell you about one other project that I think is interesting, and in August we'll be very mindful of time. I just want to pause here and see, are there thoughts, questions, comments? Is this interesting to folks in the room? What are other ways that we can be helpful before we maybe jump into the infrastructure projects?
Yeah, I have something. I guess I would just say this all sounds good, but it seems pretty high level. And I guess I'd like to, you know, if you could at some point, or maybe have materials somewhere where you mention case studies somewhere, like just what the actual numbers would be on one of these projects and how much, you know, upside or what the returns would be for investors, or like why would they do this? And also kind of just like to that point, what's like the action item from your presentation? Like, what do we do with this information you just told us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's various kind of audiences to it. It's a great comment and question. I mean, I think from the perspective of returns and types of investors, it's really a spectrum. I mean, I think there's bands that exist around if it's a real estate project. You know, I think you're certainly dealing with folks that are looking for kind of standard, you know, low to high teens type returns. For operating businesses, it's a little bit more custom and specific. But I think that the next step that we would add on this is that we'd really like to engage with any of those conversations that are happening on the local level. We'd like to kind of play a role if there's a project that you have in mind that you say, hey, we are actually doing stuff and we'd love help in kind of raising capital or exploring incentives and seeing how we layer that into the stack. You know, I think we can be a helpful resource in that. I think today we don't necessarily have an ultra specific kind of takeaway saying that, hey, after you leave, we want you to do X, Y, and Z. But I think it's more just introducing what is a very high level concept and hopefully starting a conversation that gets more specific from there. But I think as we share the resources that come from this, the playbook, the slide deck, some of the other examples of projects we've seen, we'd welcome follow-up dialogue. I think that's my biggest ask, is I would just welcome follow-up conversations from this. And I see, Stuart, you nodding.
Yeah.
If there's anything you'd add to that.
No, I think it's spot on.
What's the upside for the opportunity zone in terms of it saves, you can invest in a project and not have to pay federal tax on it, or what on the gains, or how does that? I don't understand.
So on the opportunity zones, investors have to invest capital gains dollars on the front end. So rather than paying taxes on those capital gains, they get a deferment. Whatever they're investing in, if they hold it for a minimum of 10 years, because it is a long-term hold incentive, then they still have to ultimately pay the tax that they deferred, and they pay that tax no later than the end of 2026. So you're still paying the tax you're deferring today, but whatever you're investing in, so long as you hold it for 10 years, your new gain can be exited completely tax-free. So if you're investing in Grand County based on the trends that Max, you know, very well kind of walked us through, you might have a thesis that's very bullish and say, you know, 10 years from now, whatever it is I'm investing in Grand County, I think will appreciate significantly. Your tax on that new appreciation can be completely forgiven if you hold for a minimum of 10 years. And so there's about $30 billion of capital in the country that is mobilized into investment funds that are looking for a wide array of assets for exactly that. And I think we've had a lot of inbound requests, of course, for deals on the Wasatch Front for obvious reasons, capital flows to the least risky places. But I think as we look at rural Utah and look at places that are further away from the Wasatch Front, Grand County is probably right there with Washington County in terms of the number of inbound requests that we've gotten just from investors saying, hey, what's happening down there? And so I think that your region is really well positioned to try and take advantage of the folks that want those types of incentives on their investments.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot like a 1031 exchange and like with real estate.
Yeah, it's a lot more flexible though. There's no like for like trade like there is in a 1031. You can pocket your cost basis, unlike you can in a 1031, and it seems to have attracted a higher level of check size per investor. So at the LP level, the investors into funds, there seems to be a larger volume of capital. So you've got more third-party managed funds in opportunity zones than you do individuals making investments like you might see in a 1031. So it's a good comparison, but I'd say it's a little bit broader, which is what some people have called it like the mother of all 1031s.
Okay, Mary, I saw asked what is a 1031? It's like I mean, I guess I'll do a quick. It's just a way to if you buy real estate and have a gain on it and you want to sell it, you don't have to pay taxes as long as you kind of reinvest that money in another real estate transaction. It's like a weird sort of way the law is written that really benefits real estate investors and helps them avoid paying taxes on gains as an incentive for them to keep investing their money as opposed to, I don't know. So I guess my other just follow-up question would be, that's that. So yeah, the mother of all 1031s is probably a good way to summarize it and makes a lot of sense to me. In terms of, right now in sort of what would be relevant to us, there's probably more investors that want to put their gains to work in a tax advantage way than there are projects. Is that the case right now?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that capital is usually not the issue. There's not a shortage of capital that exists here. I think that there is another conversation to be had around the risk tolerance of that capital. So while the money itself may not be the issue, like there's plenty of money for projects, I think actually getting the money to move and to accept whatever the risk is of coming to a place that may be less familiar for them or maybe a little bit more perceived risky. And I'm not saying that personally, I think Grand County is, but I think some investors have said, you know, I'm not quite sure why I would come off the Wasatch Front. That's really where we've seen a little bit of the friction occur. And I think that's really the role we collectively want to try and play is how we put things in place to help offset whatever that perceived risk is, whether it's the addition of other local incentives, whether it's bringing in federal resources, whether it's going to the state and seeing if there's other things that they can do, or whether it's even just helping investors get familiar. I mentioned the investor summit we hosted in December of 2020. I think the investors we brought to that, they were like, look, I love coming to Moab on vacation. I never would have thought about coming down here to invest, but when a guy like Jim Sorensen calls and says, do you want to come down for the day? I'll do it. And it just opened my eyes to what's happening. So I think there's some education that has to occur as well. But there's not like, you know, if you have a really good project, you're not going to have an issue finding the money. I think it's more about finding the conversation avenues.
Can I add to that?
Please.
To kind of build on what Patrick's talking about on kind of further de-risking, using things like tax incremental financing. The other piece, the state of Utah has their state allocation of ARPA funding, as well as, you know, I think Moab City and Grand County. August, you can maybe speak to this or someone else in the room, but there's allocation there. So using any kind of resources, whether it's incentive resources or, you know, the large amount of stimulus dollars that are flying around to de-risk the project will help in terms of attracting opportunity zones. And it doesn't have to be structured in a way where it's a direct payment to the, you know, the development entity or the operating company. But if there's an infrastructure need and the county and the city have identified an area where they want to see a certain type of housing, you know, I think Max hit on this, but I think Moab and Grand County are acutely feeling the drag that comes with being a strongly tourism-based economy, but you don't have, affordable housing options for people to do the work with the visitors who come in. And so kind of finding the right deal and structuring it in a way where the public participation it kind of shows the private investment community that they're wanting to be a partner. The incentive will help there too.
Yeah, and you mean one example of an incentive would be something like first loss or something, capital?
The easiest, the lowest hanging fruit just in Utah would be tax incremental financing. But yeah, some of the things that you can do with the stimulus dollars that are flying around, you can do kind of first loss positions and those things. We can get more granular on those conversations, but I think what August needs, and we're here to support him and his team. He needs probably, August, I don't want to speak for you, but getting some direction from this collective group of community leaders to say yes. And opportunity zones is just kind of one piece of the mix. And what we've seen a lot of transactions that we've been working on throughout the state over past several years is you might not even see OZ dollars that come in, right? Like that's not necessarily what you're going after and chasing. But what it's done is it's begun conversations in communities like yours that otherwise wouldn't have been happening.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, it sounds good. I'm sure there's a lot of money that would be looking for projects and I think it's something that we should look into. If we have any see if we have any projects that could earn a return, on an equity basis that might be interesting to investors, and that we could, it would reduce our capital commitment as a county.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Lacey has a question.
So just in terms of projects, are you seeing that maybe is there maybe like a dollar amount, I would say, of a project that since they're writing bigger checks, is it kind of like anything over this amount probably going to draw more attention? Or could you, do people find lots of little projects? How does that go? Dollar amount?
Yeah, I'll take a stab and then others can follow in. I mean, there's no uniform amount. It varies by location, but I will say that for the most part, if you're trying to attract, whether it's an opportunity zone investor or even just a private investor in general, I think the smallest investments that we've really seen where folks are kind of engaging at a level of talking about local incentives or outside sources, it's probably $1 million on the low end, and we're seeing more that are higher of 5 to 10 million beyond that. But there's a lot of projects that come across our desk that I'd say are like $50,000 projects, and they're really good local investments, and they're really good kind of things for the community. I think oftentimes those, not all the time, but oftentimes those fail to kind of get on the radar of the network of private investors that we're trying to go after. But what we have seen and have played a role in is kind of seeing a syndicate of maybe local investors stepping up to take on some of those smaller investments. And this is where we've also been able to go through some of the federal partners, whether it's at the Economic Development Administration, whether it's through the Small Business Administration, and really tried to make the case that we need additional incentives from that side to try and help de-risk some of these more small scale projects, because they sit kind of in this no man's land where it's way more than enough money that any one person can solve. Like I wish I was walking around with $50,000 burning a hole in my pocket, but it's way too small for a lot of the funds that are in our network. And so how do you help them kind of get out of that in-between space is one of the things I think we've seen.
And there's, Patrick alluded to this early on, the project on Brigham City Main Street is a prime example. The guy who pulled that together is an airline pilot, retired, or is he still an airline pilot?
I think retired.
Retired airline pilot who is not originally from Brigham City. He relocated from California, and he just loved Brigham City, and he found a historic building. And I think he did kind of a pass the hat situation. And that's the nice thing about OZs is it's a self-reporting mechanism, and it's a biannual report to Treasury. And you have to adhere to the rules, but you can create your own vehicle. So like someone in this room could have a project and do a similar situation, and you could pull together $1 million and kind of rehab a historic building, or take that really cool lot where all the food trucks are and do something maybe more interesting there. Because to pass the test, you just have to, the rules better than I do, but to pass the test on a real estate investment, you just have to do a equal improvement of the actual cost, right? So if it's $1 million acquisition, you've just got to do $1 million, and then you hold it for 10 years, and you pass and you do your biannual reporting on that, and you pass the test of getting the deferment of the new capital gains that you've realized on that development. And that's something that you probably don't need outside investors. You could probably find that level. You could put a group together to do a project of that size and moat. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a follow up also, how messy does it get if say a project developer was to take maybe, 4 or 5 smaller projects and package them together for an investor? Is that typical or no?
I mean, that goes into the exact piece of what the playbook really gets at, which is having kind of the coherent communication strategy, making sure things are kind of packaged in a way that kind of quote unquote speaks investor. I would argue that that's probably a better offering to have 4 or 5 of them packaged together than just having individualized ones, if you find the right investor and you have the pitch kind of really nailed down. So we'd love to follow up if there's anything we could do kind of on that front.
I'd love to follow up with you guys.
And then I going through the intros, you've got somebody from planning and zoning. Maybe your incentive is not something like tax incremental financing, but maybe if you package those projects together and you can already have them in place where they're air quote shovel ready in terms of being able to walk in and pull the trigger and be able to pull permits and go vertical, that's an incentive in it, because you're on a ticking clock with the opportunity zone dollars. And so that's one of the risk components when the money's coming in. They need to know that they're going to be able to meet the treasury requirements to go vertical so that they reap the benefit of being a qualified opportunity zone investment.
Yeah.
Any other questions that went down into the weeds and back up? But I think really appreciate again everyone's patience. I think that was really interesting, and it helps get the conversation started. We're going to go over all of the various different things that we're trying to work on, and I think this helps get my head around really project development, getting that to the point where we can actually wrap the package together, and even if it's not an OZ developer, somebody else putting that money in. Any other questions on that before we go to Jade? And I think after Jade, maybe we'll take a quick break. Does that sound good? People need like a minute right now. Hearing silence, I'm going to go to Jade. If you need a break, just ask for it. Okay, no break. Jade, do you want to come closer? Maybe just on the other side of this table here.
What I think you want me to do next.
Hey, Jade.
Yeah.
Patrick and I just threw the slide up as just like a reference point. We can take it down. We know you're driving the presentation or the discussion. We just thought it might be helpful to have this up to point to support what you're saying. I know you're going to be talking about the capital projects database that we're developing, but I also thought it'd be helpful for the room to get a greater sense of the work that we've been doing over the past several years.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to do is I'll kind of discuss it, I'll tee it up, and Stuart and Patrick, they can really drive it home with the regional growth program. So I'll first give just a little bit of history and some projects that we kind of did. So again, I'm with the Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments. We're the regional rural planning organization for Southeastern Utah for Carbon, Emery, Grand, and San Juan County. Back in about the 70s, the Economic Development Administration, across the whole country, they designated economic development districts. Utah already had 7 AOGs, Association of Governments, established, and so it just felt logically that they would make each of the AOGs the economic development district. And so since about the 70s, we've been operating. So we're basically just a large clearinghouse for a lot of state and federal funds that come down. So the Community Development Block Grant, Social Services Block Grant, economic development, EDA grants, and we're seeing a lot of traction with some of the CARES Act grants as well as the ARPA grants. And I just want to recognize Gabe. He's here, and Gabe sits on our board. He sits on the EDB's board as well, and represents Grand County well. And so a few years ago, so that up there, you can kind of see some of those are the 5 rural AOGs across the state of Utah. We're kind of that greenish, palish, diarrhea color up there. And so, and like Max Backlund has pointed out, oftentimes we do try to centralize some of our, even though we're an economic development district for southeastern Utah, sometimes it just makes sense with Carver and Emory being lumped together and Grand and San Juan County being lumped together, but really we're here for the whole region. And so a few years ago, Emory County had lost, this is just history lesson on the regional growth program and kind of where it came from. And then myself and Stuart, we can go into some of our successes and what we've seen and what we hope to do throughout the whole region. So Emory County had lost their economic development director and they were looking for another one. Carbon County had just gotten a new economic development director, and they were just trying to look for some additional support. Emory County, it's been about 3 years now, and they still haven't hired an economic development director. That's not their intentions. It's just they're kind of still navigating and brainstorming what's going to be the best option. But they approached the Utah Association of Counties and Stuart Clayson and said, what if we build out this program called the Regional Growth Program on doing regional economic development with Stuart and Patrick kind of at the reins of that. Fast forward a couple months, Stuart and Patrick quickly learned of the AOG and some of the resources that we offer as the Economic Development District and some of the additional capacity that we can add to the program. And that's how we got looped in with the Regional Growth Program and some of our big plans. And now we're scaling it even further. And so they have the Regional Growth Program and all the 5 different rural AOGs and really looking at it from a regional, being the Regional Growth Program, looking at it from a regional approach at the AOG level and helping assist economic development directors like August in achieving some of the goals that the community has. And so in this, just leveraging a lot of the collaboration between our partnerships with tourism and economic development. So we helped a lot with when the Utah Inland Port Authority, when they were doing some of their initial conversations and satellite locations and kind of identifying what could be those satellite locations. The AOG helped with the clearinghouse. We worked with a lot of our board members and identifying what are some of your assets, what are some of the strong points that could be for inland port satellite location, as well as we were chosen with the Coal Country Strike Team. I don't know if you've heard of that. That's been primarily a Carbon and Emory County focus, but being that we are a 4-county entity, we want to make sure we're representing all 4 counties. And so through a program and a project with Utah State University, the University of Utah, Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, Castleville City, and Price City, and us as the AOG, we created this Coal Country Strike Team with a goal of raising 10,000 households income by 10% as soon as possible in Carbon and Emory counties. Of that, there were 4 interventions on how we would do that. 1 being workforce and jobs development, 2 being tourism infrastructure, 3 being housing, and 4 being custom incentives. And so we've done a lot with Main Street beautification, Main Street revitalization with Price and Castleville City, something that we're learning a lot to then be able to offer to the communities throughout our region, as well as custom incentives. Stuart's kind of already alluded to this with tax incremental financing and really being able to create some of those incentives for businesses in Carbon and Emory County, as well as working with the planning and zoning departments to create some local incentives with expediting permits and fees and that nature. But the one that's been probably the most success, and then with housing, we've been working with some USDA programs in Carbon and Emory County. But I think one of the biggest things, one of the most exciting things was with the workforce and jobs creation. We partnered with Silicon Slopes and Lehigh and created Silicon Slopes East, which is all 4 counties. And so part of that is building out an entrepreneurial ecosystem throughout all 4 counties. And that's part of a Build Back Better regional challenge grant application that we can go into greater detail if you'd like. And that's that EDA, some of the $3 billion that was released through the Economic Development Administration. We were selected through a proposal of, there's about 530 applicants. They only selected 60, and the state of Utah was one of them, which called out this entrepreneurial ecosystem that we're trying to develop, as well as some other projects in Carbon-Emery County. So we have some, that's kind of where we've seen the successes in the regional grow program, and Stuart can talk a little bit more about some of the specific ones with some of the successes that we've seen with Intermountain Electronics there in Carbon County and the Center for LNG Research Center. But lastly, I just want to touch on an organization called the Business Technical Assistance Center, which the AOG operates and has partnerships with the regional growth program. The Business Technical Assistance Center is a nonprofit. It's all 4 counties. And back in the 90s, it started out as an incubator, and we received EDA funds and renovated an old elementary school that then became an incubator space. For about 10 years, it operated as an incubator. Then over the next 20 years, it did not. It just became, for lack of better words, just cheap rent in the community, and businesses came and just kind of stayed. Over the past 5 years or so, under Jerry's leadership, she saw the BTAC and saw what kind of an asset it could be for our region. And so now it's a fully functioning co-working space in Carbon and Emery counties with a shared commercial kitchen. It has co-working lounges and kind of that co-working space that you kind of picture. And so with that, we saw the BTAC as a great vehicle to deliver a lot of programs for entrepreneurial support and additional partnerships. And so we've been in contact with August and specifically about the MARC, this co-working space that we're in, and how can we couple the BTAC and the MARC together to then maybe we have shared memberships that if someone's recreating in Emery County, they can then come down to Moab for a couple of days, and how can we make sure that we're not just siloing a lot of our programs for entrepreneurs, but that they can be delivered throughout all the co-working spaces throughout southeastern Utah. So that's another project that the AOG and the Regional Growth Program are working on, and those are the co-working spaces. In Price, we have 2 in Emery County that are on board at the Green River and Orangeville libraries. And then we're working closely with the Monticello co-working space that's being renovated in the Monticello library. And then obviously here, trying to develop some type of partnership with the MARC Center. So Stuart, I'll kind of turn it over to you, and you can kind of go over some of the other projects and successes that we've had.
No, I think you did a really good job, Jade. For the room, I think it was helpful to see the extensive work that the Sorensen Center and Kimsey Gardner and UAC have done on the Opportunity Zone Playbook. And that work is very dependent, that and all the work we do is very dependent on partnering with Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments. I think you kind of summed up the success that we've seen. I don't think it's any one person. I think it's more about getting everyone going in a general direction. And what Patrick and I have tried to do on the bigger picture, not just OZs, but whether it's getting, as Jade alluded to, getting the largest post-performance income tax incentive that the state of Utah has ever awarded off of the Wasatch Front to Intermountain Electronics, or in Emery County. I think we're probably, with all of the solar development that Emery County is getting, I think they're probably going to break $1 billion of investment on solar and battery storage. Jade, you can correct me if that number is wrong or incorrect. and then working on the San Rafael Energy Research Center. I think it's important for, and August, I think you've got a big group and you've got 3 boards that have kind of both local and state statutory requirements, but getting them together and getting them aligned, and then also recognizing that Grand County is part of a regional picture, and Jade's organization, the AOG, is kind of right positioned to make sure that it aligns with what's going on in San Juan County and Carbon County and Emery County, and then, you know, kind of getting good outcomes that align with what the community wants. That's what this program's all about. And success will probably be different in Grand County than it is in Box Elder County, and right sizing the program to be reflective of the unique qualities and attributes that exist within communities like Grand County is our goal. So I'm not real comfortable with being like, oh, look at all the things we've done. A lot of amazing things have happened, but those amazing things have happened because of the partnerships that we have and the trust that we have in faith that we have in each other. So that's all I'll add. Patrick, do you have anything to add?
Heard enough from me.
Okay.
I just want to add one more thing too with the regional grow program. And Stuart hit on this, that though they've had successes in Carbon and Emery County, what the good thing, the way that they've, the Utah Association of Counties and how we've kind of built out the regional grow program is, it's really, let's meet, let's develop a scope of work for each county, and let's see what those successes will be for your county, and really tailoring the program to each community. With that being said, we, through some CARES Act funding that the AOG received, we have partnered with the Utah Association of Counties, and now we brought on another consulting group to help us build out this capital asset inventory or capital projects list that we hope to have developed here within the next few months. So just a little bit of background information on that is, as many of you know, there's the Community Impact Board, and that's funded through mineral lease funds, and that's been slowly depleting and going down because of just mineral lease activity not happening anymore with regulations and things of that nature. And so we've seen a lot of our communities that have been very dependent upon those CIB funds. And with the decrease in grants and the increase in loans, a lot of these small communities, they can't take on very many loans, but they still have very important infrastructure projects that they need with them, such as redoing roads, or it can be anywhere from redoing roads or building a subdivision that they hopefully want to bring in housing. And so through this process of developing this capital projects list, what we're hoping to do is to develop some type of regional list that we can identify with, sit down with each community and identify what are your immediate goals that you have, and what are some of your right now projects that need to happen, but also in 5, 10, 15 years, what are some of your bigger dreams, some of your bigger projects that you want to do? Let's identify that. Let's build out a good vetting system to prioritize those projects and to help you help communities then be able to navigate which projects should they go after first. And then I think even taking a step further of how can we identify different funding sources, whether that's state or federal grants, or maybe it's some type of public-private partnership that needs to happen to make those projects come to fruition. But CIB is going away, and not very fast, but eventually one day the CIB fund could be completely depleted and solely reliant on loans, and a lot of communities can't do that. So that's kind of our next steps with this regional growth program, is building out that list. And so Stuart, Patrick, do you want to add anything on that list?
No, I just think in August, I don't know how much conversation you've had with Jade or Patrick, but we've actually engaged a pretty legitimate organization that's helping us. They're an international group, but they have a pretty substantial footprint here. They haven't done a lot of state and local government work here, so they're very, very excited about working with us on this project. And to kind of amplify what Jay was saying, the intent is Because right now, like UDOT has their list, there's the CIB list, but going back to the question that Rob had, whether instead of saying, let's go chase after this money, like let's identify what capital projects are needed. And it could be an affordable housing project. It could be a water line. It could be a bridge. It could be a road. And it's not going to be just a list and then we're done. It needs to be a living process that will be housed at the AOG. And then we basically kind of build an investment prospectus around each of those projects that identifies potential capital sources. And then, you know, if it's a list of 100 projects, fine. Then we focus on the top 5 and we build those out and we get those done. And then we just start going down the list. And so we will, as this gets built out, we'll want to come back August and meet with the community and read them in. But even before, even reading in the list, we want to get input from the communities to add to this. We've before the holidays, we met with most state partners. The governor's budget office is very excited about it. UDOT's very excited about it. DNR, all the state agencies are really excited about it. And we're getting the state to turn over their data, but we now need to get local input on what those projects need to be. We're really excited about that. If we had this in place before all of the federal dollars started flowing in response to COVID, I think we probably would have been better positioned to make, you know, more informed investment, but it just didn't exist. So that's why we want to have this in place for the next 50 years in Utah. So thanks for bringing that up, Jay.
Anything else?
Well, and just I'll be working with August. We'll be holding some of these stakeholder engagements to solicit input on what are these projects. It'll probably become a lot of it will be funneling it through August's office.
Sweet. Anything else on this, or I think it's probably people need a quick break before we move on. I know I need to spend. Thanks so much, Jade and Patrick and Stuart and Megan and Max and Chris and Danica. I think that was everybody. Let's take. I'm just going to propose we take maybe 10 minutes because we have more to go, and that was a lot. So if we want to come back at 2:50, don't leave the meeting. I'm not going to leave the meeting. Maybe mute your screen or mute your audio, but let's take 10 minutes and then come back at 2:50. Okay? Thank you.
Folks, we're getting started here in just a moment.
All right, everyone who is muting themselves and hiding their faces, we can bring faces back or at least indicate that you're back. That would be awesome. It looks, I'm just looking around if we have any new faces. It looks like Harley joined us sometime along the way there. Harley, do you want to say a quick hello? I don't know how much you caught of that last session.
Hey everyone, how are you? I came in at about 2:30, no, about 2:20. So I've been here for a bit.
Okay. Do you want to just remind everybody who you are and what you do here?
Sure. My name is Carly Castle. I'm the acting city manager for the city of Moab, and I'm on two boards: the Economic Diversification Board and Economic Development Board.
Awesome. I left my water bottle over there and I'm gonna grab it really quickly. All right. Like the 360 camera, capturing me walking through this. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the rest of the agenda. Okay, are we ready to dive back in? I'm gonna say yes and hope everybody's game. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and go back to my notes here. I just wanted to really say a big thank you to everyone who presented. I think that was a really great kind of starting point, a ton of information, and it's getting my brain going in the right direction. And I think it's going to help kind of color the smaller bits of what we've been talking about locally, all these different little projects and ideas and priorities and money going in different directions. And hopefully trying to focus that energy strategically. Something else I'll be talking about is, this master planning process and, trying to work in parallel, developing and getting stuff going, while at the same time trying to figure out how it fits into a larger strategy. So the first kind of part that we've got going on here is a kind of an overview of the three bodies that we have here, the advisory kind of committees and boards here in Grand County, what they are, kind of what they did in the last year or so, how they've been working together, and we'll start there. So we have the first one I'm going to go over is the Economic Development Advisory Board, which was created, I believe, in 2020 to comply with the Senate Bill 95, which created the Rural County Grant Program. The state requires that we have a community economic development board to advise on and help implement the grant funding from the state. So that's, a handful of money went from the state legislature to the governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. They give out money to each county to spend how they want, so long as it's kind of economic development focused. So in 2021, we got kind of the first round of what that looked like, which was $95,000. I might just pull up the actual program report instead of my little mini note here. Just 'cause I think it's, so we in that tranche, so that there was no part A or part B in 2021. Part A is basically all but guaranteed. You have to come up with a plan and make an application to the state, and the max amount is 200 grand, which we're going to get. We have received for 2022, but in 2021 we received about $95,000, and it went a couple of ways. So this Economic Development Advisory Board met quarterly, put together a plan, and helped to disperse this funding. So really quickly, yeah, Ben.
Maybe just for this part, we could spreadsheet up there.
Oh, right, because these people can't see it. Yeah, I can do that. Apologies.
Also, sorry, before doing that, can we also get the chat? I would just
I'd like to see the chat. Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
That's going to be pretty important.
Remember a lot of this stuff.
Everybody see this okay in the virtual space? Are they still seeing it? No, they're not.
Thank you, Artis.
Yep. Okay, can everybody see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to go kind of quickly over this. Basically, that kind of pot of funding was pretty kind of relief focused, and 2/3 of it or so went as a small grant program to local organizations to kind of help grow businesses and help kind of stem COVID-related losses. So it went to 19 different organizations, amounts of $2 to $5 grand, of which those organizations, we don't have to report this to the state, but just for our internal tracking, as of the time of reporting, which was August of last year, had spent about 40 grand of that. So there's still some money out there that could be spent there. We also gave 10 grand to the Mark here for their co-working space, which you can't see in this room, but it's downstairs, and also helped kind of buy some of the outdoor furniture so people taking calls outside and all that. And 15 grand grant went to Moab Community Childcare to help purchase space and hire folks for childcare purposes. And then lastly, it helped fund our county match, or it entirely funded our county match, which went to Ben, became Ben. So this 3,300 became Ben, who's now a full-time staff with us. So that investment, huge. Way to go. We love the AmeriCorps program. And so basically we spent it all except for 1,700. So that's in surplus. Next one. Okay, so that was part A. Way to go, Economic Development Advisory Board. Thank you so much. In the end of last year, we put together an application for part A and part B. So we successfully applied for and received 200 grand from part A. We kind of have, there's like 10 different priorities that had different dollar amounts on them. They're on a different spreadsheet that I'll go through later. We haven't spent any of that money. And there's flexibility in terms of how we spend it. So we don't have to necessarily spend it exactly how we proposed. If we find, oh, we should all be spending this on some other project or some other priority, we can do that. We also applied for the Part B, which is the first year that that's been available. It's a competitive grant award up to $600,000. That's again kind of pretty open so long as it hits some of those economic development priorities, but the idea of the program is to lean on what our community really thinks would help us out. So after we went through a prioritization process, which I think is useful to just share really quickly. So we went through a process. We went through with every different board for a different process, actually. So everybody is familiar kind of with what we went through. Basically, we threw a bunch of programs out there that we thought, you know, what should we maybe apply for? We kind of dot voted to narrow those down. We ranked the programs individually, trying to score each program on a kind of a matrix of 6 different things. And then we ended up kind of with a ranked set of programs that would be good to apply for. Number 1 being some kind of housing incentive. Initially, we were talking about supporting the private development of ADUs. Then we ran that, or I should say, I ran that by, you know, the county leadership, just saying, you know, what does this sound right? What, you know, we would like to go forward with this. And kind of got feedback that if we're going to do housing, we should focus on the project that's already the farthest along, which is the Arroyo Crossing project, the Land Trust, and really quickly in a week, basically turned on a dime to prepare this application. Eventually, what came out of it was a $600,000 ask to support the build out of a 32-unit apartment at the Arroyo Crossing area at the Land Trust to be developed by the Housing Authority of Southeastern Utah. So that's still pending. We don't know the results of that, but that's out there, and that was kind of the balance of the work for the Economic Development Advisory Board last year. Okay, next we have the Economic Diversification Advisory Council. So that was established in 2021. It was former Commissioner Curtis Wells' kind of parting gift to the county. Put together the resolution, and he worked with a planner to create this economic diversification action plan. The ordinance created this body, and it was kind of like, here, you know, take a look at this action plan, do what you will with it. So really the focus in terms of on what that was on was identifying kind of planning and zoning related impediments to diversification, something like the fact that highway commercial along 191 allows residential and commercial activities, as residential, you know, fetches the highest value often here from a second home standpoint. It built a lot of condos, and commercial really couldn't compete with the upside of doing residential. So there's no specific commercial zoning in that area, just as an example. So part of the idea was, you know, let's prioritize this and have a planning and zoning kind of perspective, as well as, you know, can we think of kind of bigger projects to develop that could kind of advance diversification priorities in the county. Also, kind of a sub priority is like, really, what is diversification and what does that look like? What do we want to accomplish? So kind of the first couple of meetings were like, what are we really doing here? Kind of chewing on the action plan and trying to prioritize of the, you know, the prescribed goals and actions in that action plan. What do we want to do? How can we carry that out? And conversations kind of included, how do we engage with SITLA? What does the new USU Moab campus look like? How can we take advantage of the CRA or the community reinvestment area that allows us to do tax increment financing in the USU Moab and surrounding parcels area, and then that kind of highway commercial zone thing. So I feel like the most productive element of what EDAC did on this past year, sorry, so many documents here, was doing that same kind of ranking, like brainstorm and ranking process on the kind of diversification side. So this is the outcome there. Excuse me, that's not actually the outcome. This is the outcome. So number one was, an economic development master plan, really trying to coalesce all of these disparate ideas and priorities and needs into some kind of a strategic plan. And then the number two kind of program was, let's get a local business expansion grant program up and running. I should take one kind of step back. There's obviously other things on there, but the main two that we started to implement were those first two there. And the kind of impetus for this in a lot of ways, I think most people are aware of this, but the county lobbied the state legislature to amend the tax code that governs the transient room tax. So that's lodging, anybody who pays to stay for less than 30 days, whether it's a campground, Airbnb, or hotel. Grand County has maxed out the available tax percentages there. And then the state governs how we can spend that money. And Grand County lobbied to allow us to spend more on kind of economic diversification and decreasing the amount of money that we're spending on tourism promotion, right? So that happened 2 years ago or so, and this is kind of the implementation side of what's going on there. One other thing that to kind of keep in mind there, basically what that meant is there was $1 million that used to go to tourism promotion that is now towards economic diversification activities. And what's important to note there, and what Chris Baird reminds me almost daily, is that there's a 5-year sunset written into that legislation, meaning that we basically have now more like 3 years to show that, we did good on what we said we could do with this money, and show like, hey, this is useful in our community and this should be renewed, and we should be able to continue to spend this money on these kinds of projects. So that's his big concern, is it was kind of his baby to get this legislation passed and this amended tax code happening. So some of those things ended up in the budget, and we'll see that in a second. Then we have the kind of longest standing advisory board, the Travel Council Advisory Board, has been around for decades. And kind of historically has been the advisory group to the Moab Area Travel Council when it was just a standalone DMO, or destination marketing organization. So basically the group that was spending that TRT money on Moab, promoting Moab as a recreation destination, people to stay here and spend their money in hotels and restaurants, and continue to impact the economy in a positive way. So that board is, again, the state statutorily requires our county to have a board that oversees the expenditure of that tax revenue. So that's one of the kind of functions of that board, is to provide a prioritized list of expenditures to the county when it's budget time, saying, okay, we've got this much money coming in, here's how we would recommend the county spend that money. Which they did. We did a great, again, also shouts out to Emily Campbell for helping us come up with this kind of brainstorm and ranking thing. We did it with everybody this year. So, again, went through this process and ended up, not EDAC content, oh, that doesn't look very good. Maybe this didn't come out as well. I'm just going to go to the final product, which was the prioritized list of expenditures. So, suggested to the county commission, here's how we should spend that money. So basically, just a brief overview on tourism tax revenue in the county. There's two. One is the transit room tax, which is on hotel stays. The way that it works in the county is that we forecast the amount of money we're going to get in the following year. So this is 2022 forecast. And then calculated based on the state formula. here's how much money for each of the things we can spend it on. And then we kind of recommended this for this, this for this, this for that. So, 2/3 of the total $8 million bucket of TRT that we were forecasting to get in 2022 goes to impact mitigation, which basically folks felt that the county kind of had their priorities straight already. Also, that the county already had kind of a game plan there and maybe it wouldn't listen to recommendations necessarily, or that's not really what they were asking for support on. So that typically goes to search and rescue. Thank you. The sheriff's office and numerous other things. I'm not all that well versed on what's on that side of the house. Then recommended for the tourism promotion bucket, which is 1/3 of 37%. It's very confusing. Basically, $1.4 million anticipated. So first priority is salaries and overhead for the travel council, continuing to doing marketing within the constraints of what the commission wants to have happen, develop a local business marketing program, continue to fund events in the area, and continuing to fund a data dashboard for economic data and indicators. Then there's also rec film and conventions. Recommended that we match funds for recreation hotspot. So we're doing an Arches hotspot program we have funding for to develop microtransit, funding Moab to Monument Valley Film Commission, ding, ding, ding.
Thank you.
Fund a responsible recreation program. So that's going to be quite amount this year. That's going to active transportation and trails to develop kind of a trail ambassador program. And then kind of just funding that's not just for putting on and marketing events, but also, the purchase of materials and developing recreation film and convention resources. And then some research to help understand tourism and usage patterns. And then on economic diversification activities, some more. I think I'm getting a little too far in the weeds here, but basically the real ask is take a look at all of this, make some recommendations, and it found its way into the budget. So we'll look at the budget kind of shortly. We also kind of made a recommendation the I forget what TRCC stands for, but it's basically restaurants and rental cars. So that includes OHVs, it includes UTVs, rentals, all that jazz. That primarily goes to fund the Grand Center and OSTA. So that's the Old Spanish Trailer Band. The other recommendations were let's help buy a stage and let's develop some pickleball courts. So those kind of end up in there. The other kind of element of what the Travel Council Advisory Board has kind of really worked on outside of that tax advisory responsibility that's statutorily there is that they've advised our department on the tourism marketing side, what should we be doing to market the Moab area, and kind of practically trying to thread the needle between what the tourism industry thinks is a priority and how the county commission would like that to be shaped to try to emphasize sustainable, responsible, and kind of lower impact recreation in our community. Something to note is that our current contract with Love Communications, who has been the ad agency that we've worked with for years, expired at the end of the year. So we don't currently have a contractual working relationship with Love. We are working with an RFP to get a new ad agency and kind of figure out piecemeal what the services that they're providing, what we want to continue working with. If it's them, if it's someone else, I personally think they're great and would love to continue working with them, but it's an open bid process. So we, if someone kicks butt with the proposal, there's a chance we'd switch. They've also been the scoring committee for an event marketing grant that has supported organizations such as the Folk Festival, the Summer Free Concert Series, etc. That's mostly focused on shoulder season events It used to be all year long, but my understanding is that the priority was we don't need to boost tourism visitation when there's already tons of people here, but let's use this to kind of grow the season a little bit, which has become huge. Folk Fest in November is one of the right? Is one of the biggest fun things that happens that brings people here. So additionally, it's kind of the de facto kind of tourism industry representation, kind of as it pertains to decision making on tourism policy and the grant, engaging with the grant with the county. I think it's fair to say that that role has been strained in the last couple of years as the commission has made a priority of kind of shifting what they want to promote tourism, what they want tourism to look like. And, I think so far, since I've taken over, we've really focused on trying to build those relationships and make those working relationships and figure out how can we kind of all work together to make our priorities meet and have really good conversations and kind of build progress where we can. Did I miss anything on the travel council stuff? Kind of in big picture. Okay, I'm assuming that's no. Sorry, go ahead.
I was thinking, I don't think so.
Okay. So kind of with that in mind, I guess I'm just going to keep going along here and then we can kind of have some general discussion shortly. But one of the main things I wanted to talk about is that one of the things that's kind of been tough and a little confusing for me coming into this is that the economic development and economic diversification board seem to have some overlapping interests in terms of non-tourism focused economic development strategies that still could benefit those who are in the tourism industry. Just general entrepreneurship support, business expansion and retention, infrastructure, co-working spaces, yada yada yada, housing, etc. And EDAB kind of taking this function as the statutory group that complies with the rural county grant legislation, and the diversification body kind of taking on, to me, advising on how we're spending that $1 million of diversification money. So one of the things that I want to consider, maybe talk about today, and one of the biggest reasons why is that it's caused kind of inefficiencies in how our office is operated. We have to do, agendas and meeting minutes and bring people up to speed on kind of similar issues that are happening in different rooms at different times. So one of the things I want to consider is consolidating those two groups in such a way that is mindful of the participating of the existing board members that would like to continue to participate, making sure that future board makeup allows the group to be representative of relevant stakeholders. I want it to be small enough to be effective, and ensure that it can manage the responsibilities of the rural county grant program, advise on the diversification strategy, and just general strategy on how our department has become an economic development organization. Because we're a DMO, an EDO, and a film commission in one little cute house across the street. So I just wanted to kind of open that up to folks, specifically on the EDAB and EDAC boards, to get an idea of if we think that's the right direction. Mainly, I'm looking for dissent because I'm in this direction. I think what would happen would be probably dissolving both boards and creating a new one in one county resolution. Gabe, is that the right term? Resolution or the ordinance? Or probably resolution. And that would kind of make all the details clear based on that resolution language. I think we would have both groups affirmatively vote on that resolution language and say we suggest the county commission take this on. But mainly looking, do people think this is a bad idea? And why?
Well, I hear you saying that this is going to help you, be more effective at your job.
Yeah.
And so that resonates for me. I want to help you be more effective at your job. I think that there are certain aspects, especially of the EDAC, the I don't know how to. The diversification board, such as, as it was initially conceived, like seeking investment opportunities, attracting businesses, examining the land use code. I think that as it stands, this board hasn't been very, that hasn't been the strength of that board to begin with. So I think, but those could still be needs, and if they are still determined as needs, I think it would be pretty, it wouldn't be that hard to create some subcommittees or some, ad hoc working groups to still fulfill those needs if we do determine that they are. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I think, as someone who sits on both boards, I can say that it seems to be a contrivance to have to update somehow either board on the activities of the other when they are so related. So I'm in support.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna throw out, not necessarily dissent, but caution.
Yeah, ready for it.
So I have at some point been on all three boards as well.
Yeah.
And what I would caution is that there is still a place. Right now, this diversification board is kind of like everything but tourism.
Right.
And we've got our travel council, which should be just tourism and nothing else, right? But it's, like you said, it's been a little bit strained the last couple of years, and what can be talked about and celebrated and cultivated there.
Yeah.
And so my concern is that, I mean, generally this development board, in my mind, was that place that, our strongest industry could be cultivated still. And I worry that if we combine that with the diversification that is anything but, that's going to get lost, and really we should still be cultivating our strongest industry.
Yeah.
And so it would totally depend on the new rules around this combined board. I don't know, what are your thoughts on those concerns?
I totally agree, and I think this is a little bit of a foreshadowing into kind of where my thoughts are on the economic development master plan process, because I think, ultimately siloing tourism and compressing it, I think is not kind of my goal with how I want to carry our department's operations. And I think that's kind of happening. And ultimately what I want to see, I think there's some art, it seems, if you really want to go consolidation crazy, that maybe there just needs to be one board that has like a million different subcommittees, which I don't love either. And so, I kind of do want to have this larger conversation that's not just like, okay, should we just combine these boards, period? I think I want it to be part of the larger vision of really what's happening, which I think is that, like, what my vision is, okay, we have our traditional, I think Ralph's used the word legacy. We have this legacy tourism industry that's, people coming here, they're staying at our hotels, they're going to restaurants, they're recreating in the outdoors. Like, I think that is what that looks like, and a million different kind of little bits and ways to engage with that. And that our department's historical goal has been to increase demand for those services in our community via marketing and basically saying, come visit Moab, right? And what I'm hearing from the commission's perspective on using basically our department as kind of a policy lever to enact the changes that they'd like to see in our community, is making the kind of the marketing specifically moving away from come to Moab to, okay, if you're coming to Moab, let's do this in a way that's responsible, that's sustainable, and that ultimately has a high economic impact in our community. And I think one of the issues is that what the sentiment has been, and I think COVID and the lack of face-to-face conversations led to this, is that it feels like, okay, tourism is over and shut out, and it's not a priority, right? And I think for me, I think the way forward is, what are the specific metrics and the specific economic indicators for the tourism industry do we need to be tracking and aiming for? And then what are the specific kind of impact and sustainability and kind of responsible recreation metrics that we want to be tracking so that we're balancing that? And then what are the strategies we're taking on to hit that? And I think some of those things is on the marketing side, you know, with like Arches Timed Entry. That's an educational exercise that is going to increase the overall visitor experience and quality of, you know, the local tourism economy if we're really focusing on that. And I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that I don't think siloing you know, tourism as an economic development tool and diversification as an economic development tool should necessarily be like so separated. And I think all the conversation should be integrated in a way. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do that. And so I would imagine that if we have kind of this travel council advisory board, and we have some kind of like, I don't know what, you know, more like kind of just like business development, economic ecosystem supporting advisory group that would kind of take the EDAB and EDAC priorities and collapse it into one, that both groups are speaking the same language, but they're using different tools and they have slightly different kind of priorities, but that we're all on the same page of like ultimately where are we going. And maybe that's a lofty and naive and hard to reach goal, but that's what I'm aiming for. So I guess what I'm saying is in concrete action, whatever the resolution looks like to kind of bring EDAB and EDAC together, which I think I'd need to put together kind of a transition team, which sounds like it'd be me, you, and Gabe to start off with, and anybody else who would want to participate on that.
August?
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, let me make a comment and try to say a little bit of what you said a little bit differently. That you don't have the time or the resources, i.e. especially people, to have lots of little silos. The other thing is that Moab has a great, I think, untapped resource. And the untapped resource are the tourists that come here. Yes, we get money from them. Yes, they boost the economy. Yes, that's all helpful for Moab, and that's what we're based on, and it's great, and we love their money. But if you take a look at the people that are coming, they could be attracted here. They could bring their remote working here. They could bring other investment here because they're in that age group to do that and want to do that. And if we could better combine the tourism message with the economic development message and coordinate them better, I think we could get more impact out of our tourism dollars for the economy of Moab and vice versa.
Yeah, I think you're thinking in the right place, which is like, how are we connecting all of the kind of inputs to our local economy to work in a way that
it's highly synergistic. Yeah,
synergistic and achieving the goals that you know aligned with the communities, businesses, and you know our political bodies' goals, and trying to find where that ground is that we can all kind of agree on for us to move forward, or at least a functional.
And organizations like yours go through this reorg all the time. They start out with multiple things, they consolidate them, and then they get to a point where they have to break them up again, and then they get to a point where they have to consolidate them again. And my sense is what you're feeling is that it's getting time to consolidate them again and be more synergistic to accomplish as a community what we want to accomplish. And we can't do that with them all running around.
Yeah, and I think maybe I might put a pin in this kind of specific conversation about combining those two boards, because and we can come back to this shortly, but I think what I'd like to do is zoom back out really quickly and then come back in. And I just want to go over basically all of the line item programs and budgets that have been approved or that are kind of out there but don't have money attached to them. I have a spreadsheet we can go through. And then after we kind of see everything that's out there, I kind of want to keep having this exact conversation, if that's okay with everybody. I'm gonna do that.
We'll start some comments in the chat.
Do you want to just share them out?
Sure. Mary McGann said, I support creating one board with the goals of both boards being placed into the resolution. Rob Walker said to have one board and have committees which can include people that aren't on the board. And Leanna, who had to jump off, said combining with clear guidelines and goals makes sense.
Great. Okay. This is the spreadsheet to end all spreadsheets for me. This basically kind of contains like every piece of revenue / expenditure, basically resource and kind of time into programs that have been talked about in 2021 for execution in 2022. So I'm gonna kind of go quickly through this, but the bottom line is that there's 30 different programs, almost $4 million. Programs made of this work. Leftover from 2021 Rural County Grant Part A, we got $1,700 in surplus that hasn't been spent, hasn't been dedicated to anything. That's kind of overseen by EDAB at this point. Then there's for fiscal year 22, all of the Rural County Grant Part A priorities. This is the application that we submitted and we're successful in receiving the money for, kind of that scattered approach which I shared before. So we said, 42 grand for workforce housing support. We haven't defined what that looks like yet. 35 grand for business support grants. Thinking along the lines of the previous iteration of kind of smaller grant dollars to businesses. Daycare grants, 35 grand to continue the work of the child care initiative. 30 grand for an entrepreneurship program. Not defined. 30 grand for the Canyonlands Business Summit, which we're actively working on. That's going to happen on February 7th, and Ben is going to share an update shortly on that. 25 grand for support for women and owned minority businesses, undefined. 15 grand for diversity, equity, and inclusion program, undefined. 10 grand for economic development outreach, which would be marketing of, hey, here's an event where you're going to learn about a grant program or paid social to say, hey, economic development department has a grant for you. That kind of stuff. 7 grand for education grants. I've actually had some good conversations with folks at like Science Moab who are doing the School to Science program, connecting high school students to scientist mentors. We've talked about, could this be kind of like a carrot to keep kids, if you do this program and you get into college, it's a STEM program, we have money for you. So to me, I'd love to increase that number. I think that's a great program that could be really impactful. 7 grand for remote working outreach. That's kind of thinking about USU's Rural Online initiative. And that would be mainly having events like here, where we have folks that share success stories and how to apply and how to get involved in that. And then 4 grand for another AmeriCorps Vista. We are planning to get another AmeriCorps Vista this year. Whether or not we can find them a desk in our office is up in the air. So, that may or may not happen depending on how much change we're experiencing in our office, how much capacity for bringing someone on board and figuring out how to fit them into everything. On the same token, more capacity would be great. Especially cheap and highly effective capacity. One more note there is I think another thing that isn't actually tied to anything at this point is that as a workforce development tool or workforce attraction tool, AmeriCorps Vista has brought wonderful, highly educated, engaging folks to this community. Gabe, for example, current chair of the county commission, was an AmeriCorps Vista how many years ago? 10 years ago. So one thing I'd want to kind of consider with this money possibly is one of the things you can do, you can't pay AmeriCorps Vistas more than poverty wages, because that's the intent of the program, to be empathetic to what it's like to feel in poverty and work with the community to better it, but that's pretty hard in Moab. So something we've been talking about is, can we, kind of max out or somewhere in the middle ground, the housing and food stipend, which is allowable in the program. And whether that's to everybody or some, or, I think that'd be really effective in getting really good vistas in our community and for keeping them longer. And maybe doing kind of if you stay and you work 2 more years, here's another kind of chunk of change at the back end. So that's something I really am interested in to pursue, and, augmenting these numbers and moving them around, I think would be cool for that.
And just, August, I'm not sure, I don't know if you already mentioned, that they might have certain regulations that include that kind of activity.
Yeah, so I've looked into this a little bit, and we cannot pay if this is more. You can't pay them money, but we could provide a grant to the host organization to pay their landlord their rent, or give them a gift card to City Market or Moonflower. We couldn't give them cash, but there's ways to make that work. There's specific maxes, but I think I should point out what is a conflict of interest or something like that. Maybe close knowledge. My girlfriend was a Vista, is no longer Vista. So kind of saw firsthand the difficulties of getting paid $5 an hour in the community. But thanks to the federal government, that's a good program. We should pay people more. Part B, talked about this before, so that's 600 grand. That's pending for the Arroyo Crossing project. So this is all grant money. And then most of the rest of this is county budget that's coming from TRT revenue. So this is that economic diversification line in the county budget. I go over kind of like salaries and overhead down here, but these are kind of specific programmatic elements. So this economic development master plan, we've assigned 65 grand to that. And this is all approved, by the way. $500,000 to a local business expansion program, 100 grand to a workforce development program, 50 grand to kind of just marketing and getting people to know and be aware of this kind of these kinds of programs. Maybe that's too much money. We can move this around. And then we've put 100 grand in to kind of build out capacity for business technical assistance. Basically, the Small Business Development Center at USU has historically been a great resource at USU Moab specifically for basically people coming in. Hey, I have a business idea. How do I get a business license? Can you help me prepare my P&L statement for whatever? Apply to grants. That resource doesn't exist in Grant County at the moment. It does at USU Blanding. And Megan McFall, who's in that position, is now the regional director for San Juan and Grand, is an incredible, awesome, wonderful, really effective person, but she's being overloaded by taking all the Grand people at the moment. So that money is basically dedicated to help backfill the payroll for that staff person at USU Moab. There's some conversation about bringing that in our office. I don't know if I can manage more people. So to me, I'd like, it's already a part of a statewide network, helping people get custom fit funding, help people get PTAC funding, there's all these programs, and that's a really good resource that we want to kind of backfund, I should say. And specifically make that a full-time position. It's historically been part-time. Our thesis is that if we make it a full-time position with a competitive wage, we're going to get someone great who really wants to do it, and it's going to be around for the long haul.
Does Eve not do that anymore?
Say it again.
Eve, didn't she do that for a while for USU?
What's Eve's last name?
I can find out for you. We'll talk about it in our office later.
Do you know who?
Do you know Beth McHugh? It was that before her.
Okay. Maybe.
I think that Eve doesn't sound familiar to me. Because the SBDC, like August mentioned, ran through the USU Eastern.
Yep.
And then so on the Price campus, it used to be, he was the regional director of the SBDC, all for like basically even you would have basically San Juan County.
Yep.
maybe I'm misunderstanding what it is, because it's some, like, I actually went to a grant writing class at USU related to, who was it, working with nonprofits. Right.
I think it was Beth McHugh.
Everybody was there.
Beth McHugh was here. She was a retired banker. She did more than her fair share of than she was being paid for. She did it basically full-time, though being paid part-time. And then we had someone who came in who was part-time and had, yeah, Casey Barlow was here for like a couple months, but she also worked for a property management group. And I just don't think there was enough time. And yeah, and then we also had Nara Bach, who's now at the hospital running the custom fit program. So right now we're leaning very heavily on Blanding campus to run that. And I think if we can get someone awesome, that would be great. They have an office dedicated to them at the new campus. You know, there's conversation. I think see some kind of synergy there. You know, Mike Bynum has talked about developing a triangular parcel into the Innovation Center of Moab, right adjacent to USU Moab. I think that being kind of the business entrepreneurial cluster is not a bad idea. Anyway, that was a little tangential. And please, everybody online, like hop in if there's any questions, and Ben, keep an eye on the chat if there's any other kind of.
We had some more comments about combining PD board and just ensuring we have SB 95 compliance.
Okay, awesome.
And Rob is supportive of making this as life better.
Love it. On tourism promotion, the ad spend amount was basically let's have, pay for salary overhead, the carry on the typical functions of our department, the new programs we want to create, how much money do we have left over? That's going to be ad spend, which maybe is a backwards way of doing it, but it's my first time ever making a budget for a department that has millions of dollars to spend, and that's how it happened. So that's about $440,000. That's not a final amount. I mean, it's finally approved, but to accomplish everything that's being talked about, there's a chance it could go up, it could go down based on what other things we're trying to accomplish. We did receive a grant. Elaine has worked with the State Office of Tourism. They have a co-op marketing grant program that basically is a matching program. So it's basically, here, we'll give you some money if you're going to match this 100% to do a marketing campaign. Have done it almost every year, except for I think 2019, the commission decided not to pursue it, and then brought that program back to life. So the current application for that money, which basically means that 150,000 of that 440,000 is dedicated to that campaign. So there's a $300,000 ad campaign that's currently planned for targeting fly-in visitation from northern Utah. So basically the thesis is that if you're flying in, you don't have a car, you don't have an off-road vehicle, you have to go either spend your money at Moab Express or rent a car, and then you're going to be in a hotel, and then you're going to be spending your money in a restaurant. So basically higher economic impact per visitor, which we don't have memorialized as a goal, but it seems like that is a goal of what we're trying to do here. So that was going to be executed by Love. Basically, currently we're kind of in a holding pattern on that. Other things for that ad spend are for Arch's timed entry. We're in a weird position because we don't have Love, and we'd usually be like, hey, let's do 100 grand on this. What should we do? And now is kind of the most critical period to be doing that. So I think we might have to just start doing stuff like targeted YouTube ads. So basically placing the NPS video they already created. And for anybody who's looking at arches or national park in Utah or mountain biking or off-roading, having a quick video that has that little 5-second thing that you have to watch because you can't skip it, that kind of captures it. And then having the rest of the video there, informing people of timed entry, kind of thinking that social is a targeted way of doing that, and then probably also targeting confirmed visitors to arches on online travel agencies like TripAdvisor, Expedia, etc. And then also we're doing kind of a smattering of print advertising. USA Today does a national parks guide. A couple other places we've kind of started doing little bits and pieces. We're going to put it in about happenings, cetera, et cetera. So anyway,
How quickly do you plan on having that RFP and the deadline to our contract?
for the RFP, well, so I, again, brand new to this kind of process, but when I was talking to Love, they anticipate, kind of with their processes, like, 10 weeks from when they can, when it's out there. So that includes, it probably has to sit there. County policy has to sit out there for like 10 days or 2 weeks or something like that minimum. The advisor means the longer it's out there, you're giving people a better shot to apply for that. So it could be like 2 months, which puts me in a tough position to like get stuff going. There's also the possibility of breaking up that. You can see that here. We currently have like $100,000 budget for that. There's a chance we can break up kind of the contracting there. One of the things they provide us is really great data services, overnight rental, occupancy rates, and average daily rates, and who's visiting here using cell phone data. And it's really good when they have that in-house, because then they can basically use that to inform strategy for marketing and evaluate effectiveness of marketing as well. So, it wouldn't be a bad idea to just do the data and break those up into 2 separate contracts. And then if it's less than 50 grand, we can actually do phone or email bids, and it doesn't have to go to RFP. So there's kind of an advantage of making a piecemeal, but if it's greater than $50,000, we have to do an RFP. Do you have any other questions? Okay. So I'm trying to figure that out. That's okay. We've also put 55 grand to a local business advertising program. The thought there is that, our office is doing, general area marketing, and larger businesses in our community, like the Hoodoo, who have, larger institutional funds to do their own marketing. And this is actually Daniel Loveridge's idea, who is the GM of the Hoodoo, that, for our smaller mom and pop tourism shops, creating some funding for them to do marketing for themselves would be a really great kind of asset to the community, and be able to give something to the local tourism community as well. Again, undefined. That's the idea. We haven't built a program about it. Local event advertising program, that's kind of the legacy program that we already have had, funding folk fests, summer concert series. We already kind of have some requests coming into that. So that's already a well-defined program that already has grant agreements and sample documents there. We put $50,000 away for tourism visitation research. So what that is was we've had conversations with a professor at USU whose name I can't remember. Leanna's on, she can probably remind me. Can't remember his name, but his focus is basically when you're managing lands and there's visitors involved, evaluating the impact. So what we've been talking, it had some light related name, but that meant something different. Basically, this would be working with someone who can help us evaluate what's the impact of time entry, really, not just at Arches, but at our BLM land, the Corona Arch, up in the Forest Service area, and doing a combination of in-field survey research and kind of coalescing all of the various data inputs and say, what happened actually when we instituted timed entry to our various places that aren't arches, to the actual economic impact to our community, etc. That's something that has been prioritized. I think a great idea, but we haven't been able to start really make happen. Robert's kind of in charge of this one. We have a program where we solicit requests basically for information on our area on our website, and we also we send out travel brochures to them, and then we also have kind of distribute these locally. But basically, we have pallets and pallets and pallets of these. Eventually, we run out. We need to make new ones. So the 65 grand is about 30 grand for postage in a given year. So we do spend a lot of money on postage to send those out, and 35 grand to for the development costs and the printing costs for like the next batch, which we think could be this year. Did I miss anything on brochures?
No, that's, we also market the leads that we get for that, so local business.
Right.
So they can kind of tap into our bigger marketing program.
Right.
Very inexpensive.
Yeah, so we basically, everybody who requests that, they have to opt in, I think, to say we can share their information, or I don't know how that works, but.
Correct. Yeah, when someone logs onto the website, there's an option to share with local business.
Yeah, so basically we get lists of contacts, local businesses, buy them from us like incredibly cheaply, like what is it?
2 cents a lead.
2 cents a lead, so very inexpensive. I don't know how many people really take advantage of that. Robert, do you have any?
There's probably about
30 businesses. So I mean, that's something we could market off too, and just say like, hey, this is a resource.
Right.
But that's something that we do offer. So those leads we then kind of pass on to the community if they want them. And then 30 grand for various trade shows on the kind of tourism side of things. So there's a smattering of tourism related things that we go to. IPW in Vegas. There's outdoor recreation. There's so many. And that budget has decreased over time, trying to make that very effective and targeted. And that's basically kind of industry relationship building and generally getting institutional tourism folks who are looking at Moab as maybe a place that they want to do their bus tour, or that they want to bring international tours to, kind of that legacy tourism infrastructure, where someone goes to a travel agent and they buy a package from somebody else who works with a local supplier, which is actually very much how the international consumer base works historically. Europe and Asia, they go to travel agents still, although that's changing over time. So anyway, that's what that money's going to. Out of the rec film and conventions budget, which is a subset of TRT, we set aside 160 grand, which was the full kind of film commission budget proposal. So that pays for Biga's salary, and it pays for just other stuff, which we're working on figuring out what all that is. And Biga knows, I don't.
I've known what that is for 7 years. I know
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
Biga's a total pro. We're super grateful to have her, and that money pays her, which is awesome. Although we'd like to give it to her all, maybe.
Would like it all.
Yeah. And then there was kind of a concerted push to kind of talk about, can we get this a community stage for Moab? This was led by Cassie Pop of the Folk Fest and the Free Concert Series, kind of just pointing out the economics of renting this portable stage that they were doing several times this year, how expensive it's like 16 grand to rent for a single instance. That this is something that not only will allow us to put on community events, it's basically an asset to help us do more special events, and something that we can rent out to neighboring communities, because really the Wasatch Front is the closest one where any of these kind of high quality stages exist. So we can rent them out to San Juan and Grand Junction, et cetera, et cetera. The money's there. There hasn't been a plan to who's going to manage it, where's it going to park, who's going to put it up, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of outside of what I'm not going to be figuring that out, I hope.
We have a joint meeting coming up at the end of this month with the city council. We're gonna
Awesome.
Try to iron out some of those details.
Woo! Thanks, Gabe. And then that 40 grand for kind of like non-marketing grant stuff for, it could be one of the really the reason that came up actually was we got a request from the former director of the MARC, Liz Holland, who was looking at upgrading this setup, this screen and projector setup, which is kind of ad hoc, and putting together a professional projector up here with a drop-down screen, that this could become kind of part of the convention or meeting space infrastructure at a higher quality level, that anybody could host a meeting in here. It could be a money-making event, et cetera, et cetera. We're planning to use it actually in conjunction with the Hoodoo for our Canyonlands Business Summit as an additional meeting room. It's close. I mean, it's a short walk. It's not ideal, but there's really not enough space to do proper breakout spaces at the Hoodoo. So something like, helping to purchase a community asset that could be used for really any of the rec, film, and convention resources. So that's kind of undefined at this point, but a pool of money we can pull from. The remaining budget lines, I'm not going to bore you with, it's stuff like utilities and our salaries, boring, who wants that, and benefits, etc. And that adds up to about 900 grand. I assure you most of it's not salaries. And Mick is in there. So there's a 40 grand or so contribution to the Mick. I think it's 38 what I've written down. If that's wrong, we need to change that.
I think it is 45.
45. Okay, we'll take a look at the budget later. Yeah. So there's a ton of stuff in there, but just wanted to capture basically the totality, which is basically that we have a little under $4 million to do stuff with, a lot of stuff with, and it's kind of my responsibility, I guess. I mean that kind of tongue in cheek because it is my responsibility, but with everybody else who's involved in this conversation.
Just for my clarification, can
Yeah.
you tell me, when you're breaking it out budget-wise and salary-wise, and there's specific monies that's being for, tourism staff, and then there's specific money being for economic development teams, like, how do you guys decode your time? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's something that to get the budget passed is kind of not finalized. It's kind of just like, here's all the salary we're gonna put in one area and we'll iron it out later. In the final reporting, and to make sure that we're complying with TRT laws and all of that, we're gonna break down basically with each individual staff member's salary and benefits compensation package, how much time they spend on each of those three categories, and then that's how we're going to do the reporting. So like, Robert and Melissa, the lion's share of their time is tourism promotion. I'm much more split. Ben is almost exclusively, we'll call it diversification, and then Viga is going to be almost exclusively film, right? And so, but then that's how we break it out in terms of the final reporting and which money goes where. But it's kind of a work in progress. What was approved in the budget is basically a bottom line, and then once it's within that kind of account, like a fund, we can move money within that. I have to work with Chris to do that. So yeah, it's a little complicated. Any other questions kind of on what's actually in here before we kind of zoom out and talk about like my ultimate goal, which is like, how does this execute a strategic vision? And running these two things in parallel, this execution side of things, where I'm executing everything or our department is executing everything we've dedicated here, and we're trying to kind of put a planning process together that memorializes all of these conversations about what we're really trying to do into more of kind of a living planning and strategy process, which is captured on that economic development master plan. Does anybody have any questions about what's in this spreadsheet?
I'd like to see more in the education line. I think that's something that I do in the past. I go into the schools and I try to do film challenges and bring them into a world. And I think that if there was a way to future that as an aspect towards going to college or whatever, would be awesome, because I never had funding for that. I just did that because it was an idea that I had.
Right.
So I put on these film challenges and these events that are really cool for the community.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that 7 grand is, children they like prizes.
Yeah.
They like stuff that, give them impetus to make a movie or to do things that are within the community, but could potentially bring them out into a vast industry.
Awesome.
And so, that was the one that just, I popped on with all these giant numbers and all these other places. To me, education is a massive part of my interest.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that number should be higher. I think we can spend it a number of ways. I think that money could go towards apprenticeships and scholarships, and just generally, how do we get folks more educated?
They are our future.
They are our future. Children are the future. Anyone online?
Rob,
Go for it, Rob.
Yeah, I think that what you said about the AmeriCorps Vista program makes a ton of sense. I think it should be more than $4,000, maybe even 10 times that amount. I mean, could be. I don't know if you're talking about just for the one that you would be hiring, but I mean, the free health clinic does a lot of work with that program in managing it and helping other organizations get vistas. I don't see why, your department could be pretty cool to be the kind of leader that you're going to help maybe with the city market gift cards or whatever. I think I definitely pick up on frustration of the vistas in town. And I think having even a small thing, like whether that's, a certain amount of gift cards a month will show like that Moab's making an effort for them. I think that would probably go like a lot longer than just a dollar for dollar. And everyone knows how, impactful they've been to the economy overall in terms of the organizations they now run, former vistas.
I think to clarify, the $4,000 is for basically the county match for our department to get one vista. So I think there'd be a separate line item that would, take money from somewhere else or however that works out to basically be, housing and food stipends for kind of the larger vistas in the community. And we would coordinate with Maddie at the free health clinic to execute that and figure out, is that everyone who has a vista? Is that some percentage of everyone who has a vista? Is it specific organizations that have vistas? I think the other thing to consider is also that like, there's perhaps a perception that vistas are folks who maybe have, typically a bit more privileged than like the average person graduating high school here. And that I want obviously to support vistas and help develop that kind of corner of our economy. But I want, if we're thinking about that, that could be seen as like, well, why aren't we helping, Joe's kid who graduated high school who needs to afford an apartment and is going to work at, Josie White's or whatever. So I think it's a great idea, but I think we need to consider both sides of, how that could be perceived and trying to make an impact with those local kids as well. Just because there's not a lot of locals who do this program.
Brad might have a comment, and Jason raised his hand.
Brad, you're unmuted. I'm gonna let you go first, and then Jason, you're gonna go second.
The only comment I have is that I get a little concerned when you sprinkle stuff around. I'd rather see a concentrated effort to make something happen and measure that to see what our results has been. And I think we've got some pretty good beginnings with some of our grant programs to see if we've made an impact and have been helpful. And I'd rather see us focus on things that we can really, make sure we fund them so that we can have some sort of a solid impact rather than just a little here and a little there. Moab's small enough that it doesn't take a lot to make an impact, but I still think that's important that we try to consolidate our monies to make an impact and then maybe move to something else the next year.
I totally hear you, and I think consolidating what's in Part A for fiscal year 22 is a priority, and making that more focused, higher amounts for less initiatives. Jason, you want to go for it?
Yeah, the only thing I kind of wanted to throw out there, and I know that you and I have talked about this before a little bit, but as we're looking at doing economic development and kind of branching into other areas, that one thing that really needs to be on the radar that is if we are trying to attract people from outside the area to move to Moab, who are say, remote workers or remote things like, or, workforce, are these the type of businesses that are benefiting the community here? Or are they just putting a higher strain on housing for locals, And as we kind of look at this stuff, and we're doing this economic development, is it better to put things towards more money towards daycare grant, local business expansion programs that help build businesses that are here and make them stronger without putting a higher burden on the resources that are very limited within town. If we had 100 houses sitting vacant then yeah, let's try to attract businesses that are coming here, but we don't, and so I think we just need to be very careful about where we're putting this money and who we're attracting in.
Jason, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're on to it. I just know that people that have been recruited for jobs in Moab, okay, like for teachers and stuff, have found that housing's been horrible. They can't even find a place to rent, much less buy. And so I think that infrastructure that you're talking about is critical for Moab, okay, and the people in Moab to help them do better. Some of the other things are really, so how do we get away from being so tourism dependent? Can we bring in some other kinds of things that will do that? But I agree with you. If what you do just put stress on the system, it's just going to make it worse. Right.
And that's the thing, is we're trying to keep rents down. We're trying to keep, property values down to where people can afford it. And by doing this, it could have the opposite effect, and it would.
Yeah. And part of it is can you subsidize? Part of it is can you get better wages so that they can afford it? Can you get capacity and build stuff, right? And so you have supply.
But if you can take that money and expand daycare grants, where families, aren't outsourcing, their money, so they can maybe work in the workforce more,
exactly.
I think would be a huge help.
That's why I think we were so positive about Rob Walker's proposal that he brought in for a group to do childcare. That's just critical.
I'll chime in briefly. Yeah, I really agree with what you said, Jason. And just on that, a lot of background noise there. I think the housing component, we have a big ask in this with the Part B, the $600,000, right? That's not a guarantee, and probably won't. It's a competitive thing. So if that doesn't happen, I think the budget's a little very light on housing support. I think workforce housing support at number 2 at $42,000. To Brad's point about concentrating, and Jason's point about kind of like that sort of comes first. Yeah, I'd be in favor of increasing that dramatically, because when we get that in better shape, a lot of the other things will be easier.
Totally agreed. I'm gonna say something really quickly, and then Lacey has a comment. To me, zooming back to kind of Patrick and Stuart and the whole opportunity zone conversation, I think that the bigger development style projects that I think we should be aiming for is housing, and potentially that kind of like a business innovation center of some kind. Or some kind of just like a commercial development. And I think that the way that we can do that is if we can just stack incentives, whether it's a TIF plus some grant money, plus the planning and zoning helping out, plus if we can get opportunity zone money, I think that's the way to make that money kind of go the farthest and make something impactful happen. And I think we just need to figure out, working with the private sector, working with our local developers, working with our local affordable housing developers, et cetera, what are the parcels probably that are either publicly owned or privately owned by local developers, that we can, stack some incentives on, really build up a strong project. Arroyo Crossing is awesome. We're going to keep supporting that, but we need to keep looking at what else. Again, I don't have a development background, but it seems to me that that's, I think, where we can make the most impact based on all these conversations that I'm having, is where can we stack incentives to make something that works for our community that doesn't pencil out in the free market happen? Because that seems to be the biggest problem. And to do so in a way that doesn't add to the kind of gentrification impact that is already happening. People are coming to Moab. It's cool. It's awesome. We don't necessarily need to attract more people who are going to make it more expensive actively. That's already happening. How can we do things like childcare, housing, education, local business expansion, all those kinds of things that are good for the community, good for the economy, and not overheat it in the wrong direction. I think that's what I'm hearing. Brad, you got your hand? Oh, actually, Lacey, sorry.
And then Ralph raised his hand.
Okay.
So I was just gonna say, I 100% agree. We talked about that diversification a little bit about streaming, just kind of making them worse our problems. But where I would like to see remote work is kind of thinking about the opposite way. How do we help businesses and entrepreneurs maybe utilize remote workers elsewhere? And how can, and granted, if they've tried and they can't get anybody to help them out here, are there, financial services, are there business resources that they could be hiring outside if they aren't able to fill that position?
Right, as a response to workforce shortage.
Right, exactly.
If we can't find the people and the work needs to be done, how do we?
What do we do? And so just kind of reversing what remote working looks like. Maybe we don't need them to live here, but maybe we need their services.
Yeah. And then the other side of the coin for me on remote working strategy is that I think there's a role for local folks who maybe stay-at-home moms or otherwise who could be plugging into the remote workforce elsewhere to take the program like the Rural Online Initiative, who wouldn't be able to plug into the local workforce as it is, or otherwise don't want to, and it's format, but live here, want to stay here. I think that's kind of a way that remote work.
And even just helping businesses restructure on how to do that. How can you utilize, maybe someone that's staying at home, still lives in Moab, but doesn't want to come into the office for reasons X, Y, and Z.
Reasons X, Y, and Z. Brad, you got your hand raised. Or you said Ralph.
Yeah, just real quick, a couple of things. One of the things that Moab is experiencing that the state of Utah will experience in the next 10 to 15 years is we have limited land and limited water. And Moab's getting hit by that sooner than the rest of the state is, or maybe the rest of the state.
Warming up.
And so you have to pick. Yeah.
I'm just saying, and we're warming up, which makes the water thing even more difficult.
Yeah, we have the issue of water and the issue of land, especially around Moab, right? And being able to develop and have good developable property. So we have to pick and choose our developments and what we do from the infrastructure side to enhance what's going on in Moab and for the residents of Moab. So it becomes really, really important that we just can't helter-skelter the development. We've got to be very targeted and I think very specific. And I think one of the great things that was brought up is this idea of how can we train people in Moab to be remote workers. And I really believe that the state of Utah, if we could sort of organize a campaign, they have done studies to show that people in state who work for the state want to be remote. And I think working with the state and working with a few key companies, we can, and with workforce services, train people to take those jobs remotely. So making sure that we have the infrastructure, the internet connections that are needed, et cetera, for people to do that and help them get those jobs would be critical. And I think we can do that.
Yep. I mean, fortunately on the broadband side, Emory Telecom is taking care of that for us, albeit in 7 years until it's kind of completed, but and probably longer. Stuff takes time. But totally hear you, Brad. Ralph, I think you made it. You had your hand raised.
I think he lowered his hand.
I raised my hand and I lowered my hand both. So you're both correct. And I'll just quickly say, fascinating conversation. And I raised my hand because I'm just not good at sitting in the bleachers and watching you guys on the playing field having all the fun. But I am at the end of the day here to listen and learn. So I put my hand back down and am going to learn more in so doing. Thank you for noticing.
August, if I could just if you're asking, like, essentially, if we're still on the topic of, like, are these priorities the right ones? Are we missing anything? Just to add to what Brad said, I think, and this kind of takes in consideration what Jason was talking about earlier, like I think there's a large opportunity to train the existing people in Moab to be remote workers. though you would need to, which could be a program, you would have to essentially hire someone, pay someone who is, let's say, existing a programmer, and then they could use, there's lots of services online that are really affordable to get education. It's just that you need to kind of like have someone probably say, we're going to have a class every week or whatever, and we're going to learn XYZ coding language. I think that'd be great, rather than just attracting remote workers to Moab. I mean, that's a bit like good and bad, right? Getting like someone from San Francisco to come here because the internet's good. Does it help our economy? Yeah, but it definitely is not it's not a net. It's not as positive as if we could take someone who graduates the high school here and give them a better career opportunity. That sounds like a lot better. So under like workforce training, I mean, it'd be a new program for you to consider, but I think you'd say you'd hire someone who is a programmer who wants to give back, and you would pay them a salary, and they could potentially train people to then on their own pull themselves up.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about programming as in software development. I'm just talking about there's other jobs that can be done remotely. And at the state level, the state has a number of those kind of jobs. Certain industries have a number of those kind of jobs, whether they're something as mundane as a high-end call center approach or some other kind of thing that can be done remotely. Workforce Services could help put together a training program, and maybe there's some ways we can incentivize people. Hopefully they'll be incentivized that they want to do it, and we can help them make that transition to go to those other jobs. And maybe that should be part of what we do, is to help provide a labor force to Workforce Services who puts together a good curriculum to train them.
Having an issue finding actual people to work physically here. I don't know why you're so focused on the remote aspect. I'm sorry to bring it up, but like, we have an entire town that doesn't have housing and that doesn't have workforce because they cannot afford to live here. And why aren't we training these people who live here, who have lived here? And the remote people coming in, they're living in their vans. I'm sorry, I have a lot of friends who are van lifers. They're coming in using remote spaces, but they're not giving anything to the community. We have the people here who we need to train to do that live here, our children, our friends' children. I'm sorry, it's not.
And I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at, is we need to train the people here.
No, but
Give them the opportunity.
It's not about having them work remote. It's like, let's give the people here, the businesses, the people, the trades.
It's workforce development,
Right.
of which training people to plug in to jobs that might be somewhere else is a part of it. But it's also educating the folks who are here to work here as well, right? It's both of those things.
Yeah.
I think does that capture
Well, and
your
even
comment?
work from home is what I'm kind of thinking.
That's a
It's like work from home, you're here, and businesses here need you, but maybe your schedules are, you just have to kind of be more flexible in this ever-changing, flexible world.
I mean, there's people who work from home in Moab from Spanish Valley to the city or to the county. There you go. And so like I think that's a really good way to capture it. It's just like it's different ways of working. And if we can get people trained, and using Zoom is a technical skill. So, you know, but does that capture? I just want to make sure that like we're hearing.
Yes, I'm hearing both sides now. I just got a little concerned about big semantics.
Semantics are important.
Yes.
Sharon.
I think I'm on the same page with Greg, because it went from remote working to all of a sudden bringing people from California to live here and remote work back in California.
Right.
And that, I think we already have issues with housing and everything. Why would we want someone from California moving here that's still working in California, but taking up our housing and our infrastructure? And I agree, we need to train and put money into keeping the good kids. There are some amazing high school kids.
Yeah.
They're all leaving.
Well, and I think we want to encourage them to get educated, but then have an opportunity for them to come back.
Yes.
Have a reason to be.
They're not coming back right now.
Yeah.
And this is the same issue that we had in South Dakota.
Yeah.
Most of the people that they went to college in South Dakota, and then as soon as they graduated, they were out of the state.
Right.
We
So-
want them to get back there. We have an amazing place for people to work, and we have no workers.
Totally. And I think the thing is that remote workers, that stereotypical programmer from California who has a van and is parked at Swanee but making 100K, they're going to come here and it's a part of the community, but we don't have to incentivize that.
Right.
And I think we need to be clear. I think we are clear that we don't want to incentivize, that or someone purchasing a home who can afford a $750,000 home that no one else can afford here, and continuing to jack up property values and rents, et cetera, et cetera.
And this is a little bit maybe too in the weeds for right now, because I know we've got a lot to go into, but Heber City is doing a really good trial program that I think could help us a lot. If it works out for them, we should look into it. Basically, they're looking at businesses buying into a program. It costs the business $500. The school is doing an incentive program that if they will commit to a job for 2 years, they get this match funding. It's kind of like a practice IRA or like retirement program. Like anything that they want to put into the savings account, money from the county would match that, and for their college education, basically. And then the college is getting into it on, we will give them this break on tuition if they're using these specific funds to try to incentivize them to stay local, to be trained. So you're getting, it's helping the businesses are getting kind of this 2-year commitment. It's training up the students and helping them to save up for college and further training. And then the college is getting into it on how do we keep them here to do that. And so, money for those kinds of programs, I think, could be really helpful.
Awesome. Do we have any more hand raises on the online zone? Okay, any chats?
Were you asking about my comment? I'm sorry.
I just don't know if I missed anything. Kelly, if you have something to share, please go for it.
Yeah, I'm trying to start my video. So really there is an online initiative that USU Extension's been doing for maybe 3 years that trains people sort of the technical aspects of being a remote worker. It doesn't train people coding, that kind of stuff. But there've been, I don't know what the success rate has been with it, but it's definitely probably underutilized in our area. We could likely at Workforce Services supplement with on-the-job training, that kind of thing, have a partnership with San Juan, the Small Business Development Center, the Spark Center there. They're working with Google to create certificates, to give people certificates, and we'll be working with them to do on-the-job training for companies that hire those folks. So DWS basically pays back half of the training wages for the period where the person's getting the specific training for the company that they're working with. So we haven't done any of them yet, but I know she has at least a couple people enrolled in the Google certificate program now. So there's some stuff happening that I think is promising.
Totally. And I think the way that we would activate that in our county is getting that SBDC person, which would be basically helping to get all those programs that Megan's running down in Blanding up here, marketing to get people aware of those programs, and then the state custom fit to help pay for the half of the tuition, basically. So, we have the money in the right places to make that happen. So thanks for that comment, Kelly.
And we have money for the on-the-job training portion of it. We just need to.
Money's everywhere.
Identifying places to focus, honestly. And I think that's been an issue for years in our county, that the training funding is available. We just need to know what to train people in, and we haven't quite gotten those decisions made yet. That's my perspective.
I can say that in relation to the legislative session that's about to go in on the 18th, there's some film related tax incentives that are on the table for that, specifically for rural Utah, which is us, and a lot of the other counties outside of the Wasatch Front. And if that actually passes, then we're going to potentially see a lot more film work here, which is very exciting because we actually haven't had incentivized projects coming to this area for many, many years because there hasn't been a good tax incentive for filmmakers to make their movies here. Lots of commercial work will continue, I imagine, but to me, that's we have some amazing local film crew here, and they've been here for years, and there's really, really good ones within the state as well. But things like that, we're training, talking about workforce services, like teaching students how to participate in that and working potentially with the college, US student coming in. I think it's going to be a really big, awesome aspect of the future of Moab if they can get these bills passed. And I'm happy to, talk to anybody about what that means, but I think it's a really huge thing and a really good thing. And those are people, when film projects come here, it's a different kind of money. It's not, what do you call it, like civilian tourism. It's lots of money in a period of time that are, staying in the hotels, eating in the restaurants, using the construction companies and all of the local vendors that can possibly participate. And then they go away and they leave the land better than they found it, because that's part of the, what filmmakers do. So I think, and now as part of Gwinnett County, it's going to be something that we're working towards, is figuring out how that's going to work best. But housing is still an issue, but hotels, there's plenty of them.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, to me, that's really exciting. It makes a lot of sense now that we do have Viga here. We're continuing to iron out the kind of transition stuff. But I'm very fortunate to have Viga here. I think the film side is a part of Moab's history, and I think some people feel like it's not part of the present, and the future is unclear. And so it seems like if we can get this state tax incentive, which Viga is working on, not individually, but with a lot of people who are trying to make it happen, it seems like there is inertia.
Yeah, but I think people have forgotten we were a mining town, and there was a bridge, and the film history took over that bridge for many, many years. And then it became a tourist town, but people forget. I mean, the Moab Tamani Valley Film Commission, just for any of you who are not aware, happens to be the longest running film commission in the world. And there are film commissions globally now, but we're 70, in 2024 will be 75 years old. So it's big history. And it all started right here in Moab.
Started right here, baby. Okay. I'm going to move along unless there's an urgent comment. So this kind of brings us to this conversation, I think, back, that it was started talking about, okay, should we combine these two groups? And really, like, strategically, how are we putting this all together? What is the actual logistical next steps of organizing all of these people and all of these different groups who are, I think, ultimately have the same goal in mind, which is helping to make Moab and Grand County a thriving place to live, using various tools and industries and this and that's. And I think that there is a way to do that. I think all of the programs that we have, I have a bunch of thoughts of kind of ways to move that around, and that's our staff is going to work on that. But I think what I'm trying to sort out now is, what do we leave this meeting thinking from an organizational standpoint, and kind of a planning and strategy standpoint. I guess one thing I wanted to touch on is the reason is Ralph is here, and so, is very enthusiastic and also restrained, is kind of talking about, Ralph's background historically is around, tourism communities all over the place, such as, big mountain resort towns in Colorado, but increasingly looking at how do legacy tourism communities adapt to the changing needs of the community and of the world, basically. And I think my ultimate goal with a master plan, the last thing I want is to have a big name private consultant group on the Wasatch Front create a 40-page document that's full of tables that no one reads and no one does anything with. To me, this group that we have here is a big fat steering committee for a strategic process. Folks like Ralph, like Jade, like Stuart, like Patrick are all kind of resource organizers and subject matter experts that I think can help us think through, okay, we have 30 different ideas, we have 1 million different programs, and those folks kind of have all these resources. To me, I don't know if we need to do, here's a plan. It needs to be iterative. We're going to, as Brad was saying, we have some ideas and then you break it up and you build it and you make it smaller and you divide it out. And that's a continually iterative process. To me, what I'd love to see is maybe how can we structure this big stakeholder group of economic development people help our department make the right decisions consistently, strategically over time. Something I'm wondering is, in terms of organizing, to me, this conversation has been kind of like one of the better conversations of my entire time in this job. It's been hard to be here for almost 4 hours, obviously, but like so many of these little conversations have come to light, and I think I've had a much better idea of really what we're trying to do. And I'm wondering if, from a thinking of just like an ongoing structure format, if having this kind of like all hands check-in quarterly wouldn't be a bad idea, and then having the subgroups, and maybe it's just 2, maybe it's 3, we can kind of suss that out, meets regularly on kind of basically whatever each group's goal is based off of kind of what's in here, just assigning kind of oversight and design, because we only have so many people, we need to be accountable and have reporting so we do stuff. And so I'm wondering if kind of just from like actually getting stuff done perspective, would there be appetite to do this kind of meeting quarterly? I'm just gonna throw that out there as a first step.
I have some feedback.
Okay.
What I see as maybe being comfortable would be if there is an agenda to put together and sort of really, it feels like we can have more of this really helpful and substantive conversation for you at one point during the year, between now and budget season. I could see that being, nice. And then certainly one sort of in anticipation of budget season where these priorities are aligned through the budgeting process, I think could be really valuable. So basically what maybe something like 3 rather than a full on quarterly.
Right.
Without for out there.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Having a budget approved, it's the new year, review and assess meeting, a kind of like between now, like sometime summer, maybe. And then, or maybe like June or May. And then that kind of, I'm gonna get a request from Chris for a budget in September. So like an August meeting or something like that.
It's not as clean as just saying quarterly.
Yeah.
It's one fewer meeting.
Right. I think it could just be quarterly and you skip the last quarter, because at that point it's Christmas time, we're wrapping stuff up, and that's an easy enough way to describe it. And then that would be that month meeting for that group, right? So we're not adding additional meetings. It's just maybe the time is longer. Same amount of time for me.
Brad.
Yeah, Brad.
Yeah, would it be helpful to you and your organization to form an executive committee that maybe met more routinely, and then you meet quarterly with the whole group, but the executive committee is made up of key representatives from the 3 groups, just to keep things, to help see what you need and to keep things on track. Would that be helpful to you or at all?
I think it would. I think it would just have to be set up in a way that isn't just more meetings, right? I think it would be really, really helpful because I think one of the things I'm feeling that I need is just like a go-to gut check group of people, because Mallory and Chris, my direct supervisors, are great, awesome people, but they're also running an entire county corporation, right? And, you know, I can't, it's hard to really get a consistent like team really on economic development. And maybe they'd be on that executive committee, whether it's Mallory or Chris or however that works, but having kind of a team that is helping me make leadership decisions on a regular basis would be really helpful, I think.
Think about that then as a possibility.
With that in mind, if we had, let's say, quarterly kind of all hands meetings, except for the fourth quarter, and then typical monthly meetings for the subgroups, what does that look like? Let's imagine that there isn't anything right now. Like I know I've said EDAC, and Travel Council, but really, what does it look like that needs, you know, monthly check-ins with an advisory group, you know, from the community that helps us, our department, do our job and also make sure we're getting stakeholder impact from the people that matter. Sounds like rural county grant stuff needs its own thing. TRT stuff needs its own thing. And then there's kind of this whole bucket of programs, helping us do marketing on the tourism side is a priority, helping us do general economic, I want to call it like economic infrastructure work, housing, childcare, workforce development, and then, you know, there's this kind of like diversification, which I think it's a part, like tourism and diversification are together. It's not, you know, it's not like this battle, I hope, but it's, you know, it's a decision about the allocation of resources, but I want the mission to be together. I don't know, I'm asking for support. What do people think? How should we kind of talk through these subcommittees? What would be a useful grouping? That's, I mean, I'm gonna throw out there too what I suggested basically.
Well, if you have a couple of key focused areas like housing maybe and workforce development, then maybe those warrant a committee that can move things forward and be actionable and help take a load off in trying to get something to happen, right? Maybe the other stuff that's a little less complex can be handled on a quarterly basis without a committee. That's kind of just up to, I guess what we think and what you think is the things you really want to make an impact on. And have the most, the bureaucracies of the housing and the workforce services or workforce development. I mean, that's going to take some lifting.
Yeah.
To get anything done.
I agree. And there's people in the community like Brendan Cameron who's identified he really wants to work on housing and make that a priority, but he's part of the chamber, but he's not on any of these boards. My goal for this is that whatever this like larger group of conglomerated stakeholders is a vehicle for people in the community who want to be involved in any of these particular issues to say, oh, this is the thing that I can go do. I mean, we already have a housing task force. Do we need to duplicate that? I don't know, but that already exists. For workforce development, there's Kelly's office. But in terms of really executing what our county's trying to work on, it's us. It's me and Ben. Ben?
I have some comments I can leave up.
Okay.
Okay, Rob said it all sounds reasonable. Maybe just write up a few ideas for structure and we all vote by email poll, question mark. And Jasmine Ragnarov said she's supportive of combining the e-boards, the EDAC and EDAB boards in any way that meets goals or a meeting as a larger group occasionally as needed. SB 95 does need to comply with state, but it helps if we are aware of other priorities. Glad to continue to participate in whatever works best. And Rob has his hand raised.
Rob.
It sounds like what might be useful to you is like you said, good to have another opinion on things sometimes. Maybe just have a thing where like we get used to using a doodle poll where you literally just like ask a question whenever you want via email, and then you say good idea, average idea, or bad idea. Because I think meetings, they do take a lot of time. So, if you ultimately what you want is opinion, right? If you want to talk about something, that's different. But if you're just like, oh, it'd be great to know if I have support from this group on this, just do a doodle poll.
Yeah, I think it's more really what I'm thinking about is that like ongoing relationship with the people who know what we're working on and are willing to pick up the phone and have a quick 5-minute chat. And it right now it is Lacey, it is Gabe, it is there are people who I talk to and chairs of all the boards, for example, Jenny, it kind of ends up being the people who are doing the most within the particular subgroup just to get a gut check on things. But I think for me, it's less, what's the average temperature check on this particular thing? And it's more, here's a slightly complex multi-stakeholder question. I can't quite get my finger on what to do about it, which tends to be what leadership questions look like. Yeah, I'm trying to not get too disparate here and kind of, we have 15 minutes.
It sounds like you need it sounds like maybe you need either like Brad said, like an executive group or just a group of people, or you can just consolidate this group and say, hey, part of the deal with this new group is that, that's what you want. That's what you want out of the members.
Right.
Like I'd be fine with
that. I think the main thing is like, I think it could be as simple as, the chair of each group and maybe kind of the outside support that we end up working with. If we're asking Ralph to be an advisor, maybe he's there. If we're asking Stuart and Patrick to help think through these kind of bigger economic development things, if Jade is helping us think about context regionally, having a couple of local people who are, kind of tight, and then someone who's like slightly regional as kind of that small, executive, I don't know if that's the word for it, but
Well, I think it's important maybe to involve people who aren't necessarily on the boards, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And so to do that, maybe these committees is a good idea. So the way that we've structured and are trying to structure the chamber is we have our board, and then we have these committees, and the chair of that committee is on our board. Well, not even necessarily, but at least one board representative is on each of those committees, but then those committees can go out into the community and get whatever 3 to 7 people they want. So that would be a way to just involve it. And you really only have to communicate with the chair of that board.
Right.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for, or if that's just more, but it is just one way to involve more people.
Right. Oh, that's a really good question.
And as far as consolidating the two, I think that everybody thinks that's a good idea as long as we can. Which is really a question that only the county can answer, because these boards are really, their resolutions and the makeup of them is all statutory, whatever. And so,
but
I'm all on board as long as, both of those, basically all of those industries are included.
Okay. No, I agree.
And we don't lose something in this, in.
Yes.
We don't have to lose focus on that one of them.
SB 95 funding suddenly goes to vacation only or
Yep.
vice versa, you know?
Totally. So I think the question for Ralph as an individual is that I've been trying to figure out really what is like, how does this all come together? Is it a conversation of, you know, how do we do this organizational structure, conversing with all of these people that come up with doing like the prep work for a master plan, and you know, how do we get paid for what? And I'm sensing my brain slowly dissolve out my ears here. So I'm trying, okay, so I'm trying to collect my thoughts from this long conversation, which I think has been really useful. I think the next steps is probably do a little reflection on kind of all these conversations today. Think of how to structure kind of the various groups that we have going on here, the needs. Make some adjustments to the priorities here based on the conversations that we've had. And plan to probably meet around the business summit. And maybe we still need to do kind of a big group conversation, like in conjunction with the business summit, like the day after or something like that. To not lose sight of this kind of momentum and keep it going collectively. I don't know. I don't think my brain can process much at this point. But I think the last things on the agenda right now, Ben was just going to give a quick update on the business summit. Ralph, if you have anything to share there, I'd give you a couple minutes if I missed anything that you wanted to touch base.
Thanks. I am still here. Appreciate the opportunity. This has been very helpful for me. And I want to start by saying, can you hear me?
Yes.
Double check.
Yes.
I think Brad and Rob seem to be channeling most of my thoughts as they occur to me. One or the other of them is fielding them and articulating them better than I can. So, gentlemen, thank you for that piece part. Your organizational discussions are very interesting to me, both in terms of how you communicate with one another and also how you go through this master plan. What I'm listening for is the difference between communities who want to pay somebody to go away and build a plan for them. You know, 10-year master plan with all of the support, you talked about it, you know, with a lot of tables and so forth and so on, versus a community that wants to be the masters of their own destiny and be responsible for at least the what part, you know, of the plan, as opposed to the how part that can then be executed, because that determines the involvement and the passion of the local community to get engaged in that piece part. So that's one, and it sounds like your group is very engaged. Two, and very quickly, the planning process is pretty tough right now because the marketplace is moving around so fast. A 10-year master plan completed at the end of December, anticipated 2022 to be the start of a rebuild. And of course, you know, Omicron for the next month has totally decimated, you know, that plan because things are moving around so fast. So people are having to be very firm about their long-term vision, but very flexible about how they shift, you know, with tactics and strategies from time to time, just because of that. I'm a sailor, and a sailor never goes in the exact direction of their destination. They have to go back and forth based on the wind and the currents, but they really need to keep in mind their destination so they can go back and forth. And to the extent they need to do so, August, a person like you, and this is sort of my third point, is either going to be serving at the pleasure of a board who makes those decisions and you execute them, or they're going to be in a position to actually be making decisions in concert with the board, but it's a bigger leadership role. The problem is that things come and go so fast in this marketplace that convening your whole group is sometimes more challenging than having a small group that's very nimble and can just be a sounding board, for something that comes up. The executive director in Telluride stands in front of the local post office at noon, because you can catch, a good representation of the community and test things off. So those are just little variables around the conversation that I find, pretty interesting as you think about how you're organizing yourself to be successful for the community and how you're going to roll that into, the planning process. And I've heard little bits of our previous conversation and yours, and I appreciate the, what I can do to help as this comes together here over the next couple of weeks or so, I guess.
Awesome. Well, Ralph, it sounds like we're going to talk tomorrow probably, and I might have you help me think through everything that we've talked about today. Last thing, Ben, if you want to just do also just thank you, Ralph. I think that really summarized a lot of good thoughts there. Ben, if you want to, just I'll pull up the Canaan's business overview. Ben's been quarterbacking this. I got it right here. Ben's been quarterbacking this. This has kind of been an ambitious effort for two people who don't do event planning or have ever run a business. So to try to run the premier business event for the area, we've had to rely a lot on a lot of people and be very humble and try to put this together, and ambitious in what we can try to pull off. So, we humbly present to you kind of where we're at on this, and we're trying our best to make this happen. But Ben, go for it.
Thanks. Okay. I just want to quickly say thank you to everyone who's helped me at any point putting this together. There's still a few weeks left, so if you haven't helped me, there's a good chance you will. So I thank you in advance. And if this is the first time you're hearing about the summit, then we definitely need to talk, because that means I need to do my job better. But that being said, I'm hoping that the word is still getting out there. So at the high level points, just to talk about the summit right now, after this, we can look at the agenda very briefly, and that is on our Facebook page. Attendance right now is at about 85. Most of these are participants right now. We do have, I believe, 35 or 6 tickets sold. Before the meeting started, it was 30, but I've been watching my email and there have been some sales that have trickled in. Jake, thank you. Similarly, we did at 1 p.m. have 9 sponsors, but I now believe we have 10. The sponsor funds are up to just under $7,000, which is really exciting. 4,500 of this is cash in hand that we're going to use to reimburse ourselves for whatever various expenses there are that are associated with the summit. 2,000 of these funds are in kind, and that's come from either equipment rental from the Kudu. We get a discount of that being government organization, as well as advertising in the papers in town. And I'll just read off the sponsors we have: the Synergy Company, the Kudu Hotel, Edward Jones, the Moab Sun News, Canyonlands Advertising, Emory Telecom, Rocky Mountaineer, Red Rock Ballooning, the Moab Times Independent, and I believe we just got the Moab Mall to be a sponsor as well. Tickets right now are $50, and they're going to be $80 on the day of the event. So hopefully that's an incentive to buy it sooner rather than not attend at all. So please help us spread the word. And if you think there is a way that we can help spread the word in whatever business or community or subset of the community it is that you work in, please reach out to me, because I would love to get a really stellar attendance for this. As I noted in the beginning, we have around 30 tickets sold that are people who are not participating. We really want to bring up that number. There's a lot of folks who are participating who are also attending. We're going to add a ton of value, but we want this to be a community central event. So help us help the community. On that note, we can just take a look at the agenda real quick. Like I said, this is on Facebook, and I'm glad to answer any questions you have about the agenda now or possibly later. The gist of it is, if you look on the right, whenever we have a breakout event, the event on the right is going to be where we are today in the mark. We have some really exciting sessions that are going to be put on by Megan's team down in Blanding from the SBDC. We talked about Megan earlier today, and she's a total star. So we're gonna have a really cool networking session, as well as how to design a business plan. Other than that, we're going to begin the day with what's government good for anyway, and that's just going to be a horde of resources from the state to the local level and everything in between, helping business owners and entrepreneurs understand what it is that's out there. How can we help your business from any angle possible? We're going to have a workforce recruitment and retainment panel, and that's going to bring together employers from this area as well as San Juan County and talk about what's worked and what's going to be needed in the future to continue to make that work. I talked about our networking event. Quicksand Soup is going to provide some light entertainment during lunch, and followed by lunch, we're going to have some tabling. Then at the Hoodoo, we'll have an update from time to entry, and I did find out from the National Park staff yesterday, there's still a good amount of slots open for April. They had a nice big beginning. The first few days, they had a lot of orders, but now it's really slowed down and they're really liking how it's looking. Cool. Meanwhile, in March, we're going to have a presentation on some grants that we're going to be reviewing for the community in the new year, which is now. We're going to have some networking breaks throughout the day. That will be our second one in the afternoon. We're going to have a chat on affordable housing, which is obligatory. And we're also going to have that workshop I alluded to on how to build a business plan. Wherever stage you're in business, I think this is going to be really enriching for folks. So even if you think it might not apply to you, I encourage you to check it out. You'll probably learn something. And then at the end of the day, we're going to close with towards a more just recreation future for canyons and beyond. And this is our focus to bring in more diverse voices and traditionally excluded voices from the recreation conversation. We have some incredible folks from the Navajo Nation who are going to be participating, and we're working on bringing together some more excluded voices to really chart what's the future looking like to them. How can we all bring our visions together? And then we're going to have a really cool reception at Dewey's. Yeah, take pictures and have drinks.
Breakfast.
Can I ask you to please send out a link that we can post? And if you have a little promo thing that we could post on like LinkedIn, I've got 3,000 people on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to post it through there. But if you can give me a link so I can register and see the agenda, that'd be real helpful. And I'll also send it out in some emails to associates.
Thank you, Brent. I will totally follow up with you on that. Appreciate it.
And if you don't have someone from the SBDC, I would strongly urge you to request Peter Collister from Salt Lake. Peter, who I know is a Jeeper and uses my condo all the time because he's my son-in-law, and he is a real great SBDC consultant.
Cool. Thanks, Brad. Last thing I'm going to say is that your ticket comes with breakfast, lunch, all the coffee, soda, caffeine-free beverage that you'd like, snacks, music, a reception, access. We're trying to make this a fun, interesting, engaging, minimal PowerPoint, maximal conversation, discussion, and learning, and access to networking and resources.
Geez, do you need a liquor sponsor?
Well, Dewey's has a bar license, I should say. Not that we'll be paying for it, you have to buy your own drinks, but you can come on in. It's 5 o'clock. I think we're gonna call this a day, unless there's an objection.
Thanks,
All
August.
right. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll follow up with slides and all that. But please, if you have any remaining thoughts that didn't get addressed, email me. I'm gonna try to make sure that we capture all of this and don't lose the progress made today. Thanks so much. Bye. Cheers.
Bye. Check the chat though.
Okay.
Bye.
It'll save the chat.
Thanks, August. Take care, everyone.
Cheers, Patrick. Wow. What staying on. Okay.